Hey guys, tonight we slip behind the veil of history and creep into the shadows, quiet as falling dust, into a life you definitely wouldn't want to live. You're small, barely out of toddlerhood, and someone's pressing a dull wooden dagger into your palm like it's a bedtime toy. You're not playing knights, you're practicing how to kill one. Your days don't begin with lullabies or morning porridge. They start with drills, endless, silent drills. At sunrise, you're barefoot in a dirt courtyard, mimicking stances older boys demonstrate with alarming precision. The training master doesn't yell, he just watches, and the quiet is worse than shouting. He notices every twitch of fear, every flinch, every mistake, and he never forgets. Your parents, if they're still alive, you don't see them. Maybe they traded you for food. Maybe they're in the order too. Maybe you'll meet them one day across a rooftop, cloaked in moonlight, with blades drawn. It's hard to say. The Brotherhood doesn't do family reunions. They do silence, secrets, and scars. This life isn't something you chose. No child wakes up and says, I want to become a ghost in the alleys, a whisper behind a noble's last breath. But choices are for people with power. You? You were claimed, selected early for your quiet footsteps, or the way your eyes didn't dart when the chickens got butchered. Lucky you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 7 the first time you hold real steel. It's a knife, not much bigger than your palm, but it's sharp. It hums with potential. You're told it's not for food, not for play. It's for learning control. You don't ask questions. Questions are punished, usually with silence, sometimes with cold water, rarely with the stick. You learn faster when wet and shivering. The compound isn't a castle. It's more like a forgotten monastery that no longer prays. Stone walls, drafty hallways, creaky staircases that you're told to avoid because they give you away. You sleep on straw next to 20 other trainees. Boys, mostly. A few girls. No names. You're given a number. You're told names can be stolen. Meal times are quiet, short, and usually boiled. Root vegetables. Occasionally, meat, which no one questions, but everyone side-eyes like it's suspicious. A rumor starts. One boy says the meat's from failed recruits. He disappears 3 days later. No one laughs at rumors after that. By the time you're 9, you can climb a wall faster than most guards can draw their swords. You've memorized 40 kill points on the human body, 8 with a knife, 15 with a garrote. The rest if you're creative. You're told never to enjoy it, but also never hesitate. That paradox, it'll hang over you for the rest of your short, invisible life. Historians still argue whether these shadow orders truly recruited from birth or simply indoctrinated children from orphanages and wartime rubble. The evidence is sparse, deliberately so. That's kind of the point. A well-trained assassin leaves no documents, no heirs, and no memoirs. You're proof this system exists, even if no one ever hears about you. On your 10th birthday, there is no celebration, just a new task. Trail a merchant for 5 days without being seen. Then report his weaknesses. You do it. You succeed. You return with a hand-drawn map and a list of times he scratches his beard. You get a nod. That nod is the closest thing to good job you'll ever receive. But that night, while you try to sleep, eyes half open, because that's now habit, you whisper to yourself the merchant's name, just to remember someone, just to feel something, because soon the killing starts, and after that, names become burdens. Regret, a liability, but for now, you're still allowed a whisper. The first real mission comes before your voice deepens. The target is a courier, a man with sensitive information who's apparently become too curious about what he carries. You're told he's dangerous, but you see him at the tavern. Soft hands, nervous laughter, a face that looks like he still believes in prayer. You follow him anyway. The kill is clumsy. You miss the artery. He fights. You win. Barely. You limp for days. You carry guilt for years. Quirky fact for you. Some medieval assassin orders believed in dream rites. Rituals where a trainee would sleep beside their weapon under the moon to absorb spirit permission for their first kill. No one in your order does this. You get tossed a blade, patted on the shoulder, and shoved into the night. After your first mission, things change. You get better food, warmer boots. You're not sure if it's a reward or just an upgrade because they've decided you're going to survive long enough to be useful. Either way, you're now one of them. And yet, there's no pride, no belonging, just colder mornings and darker nights. Just more drills, more poison vials, more maps with inked X marks. You're 11 years old, and already too dangerous to let go. You've made it past your first kill. Messy, panicked, unforgettable. Now you're officially part of the order. Not that anyone says it out loud. There's no ceremony, no badge, just a different kind of glance from the older trainees, the ones with more scars than expressions. You're not a kid anymore. You're a tool, and tools belong somewhere. That somewhere is the order. A brotherhood, they call it, sometimes a sisterhood, depending on the region and who's in charge. Either way, you don't feel like siblings. You don't wrestle in the mud or whisper secrets at night. You lie still. You observe. You make no bonds that could be exploited. If someone shares too much, that's a weakness, and someone will report it. The order is more than a place. It's an ecosystem of quiet loyalty, brutal efficiency, and iron discipline. And you're not just a member, you're an investment. They've fed you, trained you, patched your wounds, and made you into something that moves through the world with more purpose than identity. The walls of the compound whisper. You start to hear rumors, ancient founders, sacred texts, an original blade hidden in the catacombs. Some whisper that the order descends from a forgotten sect of fanatics who once tried to kill a king and vanished into legend. Historians still argue whether such stories are fact, fiction, or carefully planted myths meant to keep recruits obedient. You walk through these halls like a shadow among shadows. You don't know everyone's name. You don't need to. All you need to know is that everyone here can kill you in 5 seconds or less. Some could do it with a spoon. The higher-ups are almost mythical. They don't eat with you. They don't speak unless it's an order. They show up during evaluations. Those awful demonstrations where you're blindfolded and expected to disarm an attacker in under 3 heartbeats. Fail, and you're sent back to foundational training. Fail twice. No one fails twice, not openly. One time, a new recruit accidentally wounded a senior during a training match. That recruit disappeared within the hour, maybe reassigned, maybe buried. The silence is part of the lesson. You do get lessons, of course, in history, in religion, in language, not because they want you educated, but because they want you prepared. It's easier to stab a nobleman when you understand his etiquette. It's easier to sneak into a monastery when you know the chance. Fringe fact for tonight. Some real medieval assassin groups, like the infamous Nizari Ismailis, yes, the so-called Hashashin, were said to train their initiates using elaborate psychological rituals involving dreams, gardens, and simulated paradises. Whether that was true or Crusader propaganda is still debated. Your version, much simpler. Your paradise is a dry blanket, a meal with spices, and a mission that doesn't end with someone screaming. You get none of those this week. You've been assigned a new mentor. He's older, quieter, and somehow even more terrifying than your last. He teaches you how to walk on gravel without crunching it, how to smile like a servant, how to blink without betraying a lie. It's mesmerizing. He could probably kill a bishop with a feather and make it look like divine punishment. You want to impress him. That's dangerous, because caring leads to cracks, and cracks lead to leverage. But part of you still clings to the idea of approval. It's the last human thing you haven't buried yet. He takes you on a mission, not to kill, just to watch. A nobleman's feast, bustling with guards, musicians, and drunk clergy. You blend in as a kitchen boy. You watch your mentor walk past. 3 guards, smile at a baroness, and slip something under a plate. No one notices. The man is made of smoke. Later, in the quiet woods, he tests you. Not your blade, not your balance, your judgment. There were 3 chances to act, he says. Describe them. You do. 2 were real. 1, you made up. He nods. Never be honest, he says softly, unless your honesty is deadlier than a lie. Cool. That's your bedtime story now. Back at the compound, someone vanishes. They say he froze during a mission. Didn't pull the trigger. Let the target live. The guild calls it a quiet correction. The phrase sticks with you, like a splinter, in your thoughts. You start to dream of escape. Briefly, fantasies where you run away, become a sailor, or a monk, or just someone who breathes without counting exits. But those are just dreams. You know too much. You are too much. The order never lets go. Sometimes you wonder if there are other places like this, other orders, other ghosts in other cities. Historians speculate that multiple assassin guilds operated independently across medieval Europe and the Middle East, occasionally crossing paths in tangled webs of espionage and deception. Were they allies? Rivals? Theories abound, but evidence is scarce, which, again, is sort of the point. You don't ask. Questions are still dangerous. What you do know is that you're one of them now. One piece in a machine that doesn't stop. Your mentor leaves one night. No warning, no goodbye. Just an empty room and a small note. Everything ends, even us. You fold it. You don't cry. You don't dare. You just keep sharpening your blade and waiting for the next mission. Silence is now your most fluent language. You've spoken maybe a dozen words this week, and 2 of them were behind you, not in warning, but in cold assessment. Your life runs on secrets, keeping them, collecting them, burying them deeper than your own name. And the worst part? You're starting to like it. The order thrives on silence. It's a currency more valuable than gold. Every secret you keep raises your stock. Every question you don't ask earns you invisible favor. But silence comes with a price, because carrying this many lies around all the time. It starts to crush something inside. You begin to lose track of what's real. Your identity morphs based on who you're supposed to be that day. A servant, a scribe, a stable boy, a shadow. One day, you're cleaning boots and making small talk about weather patterns with a soldier who has no idea you've been paid to end his commander. The next day, you're that commander's assistant. They compliment your handwriting, but you never answer back with your real voice. You speak in accents, in borrowed tones, in phrases picked up from peasants and drunk nobles. Your actual voice, if you even remember what it sounds like, gets buried under the rolls. They test you, of course. The Order loves tests. They'll plant fake allies in your missions, give you missions with false intel, just to see how you adapt. Sometimes they test your loyalty, sometimes your creativity, and sometimes they don't tell you it was a test until the mission's done and someone's missing an ear. Historians still argue whether assassin guilds really had these internal trial by secrecy rituals, or if that's just a dramatic flourish from later fiction. But let's be honest, if you were running a network of trained killers, you'd probably throw in a few trust tests too, just to keep it spicy. By the time you're 14, you've learned how to smile while lying. You've also learned how to keep an entire conversation going while scanning a room for weapons, exits, and pressure points. You are, by most accounts, becoming very good at this, which means you're also becoming more dangerous to your own people. Because someone who knows how to kill and lie and vanish, that's not just an asset, that's a threat. And threats don't get a lot of leeway in this world. Your fellow trainees don't really talk to you anymore, not because they dislike you, but because at this point, you're all calculating who might be sent to eliminate whom. Every glance is a poker game. Every shared meal is a test of your poison tolerance. Speaking of which, fun fringe detail. Some medieval assassins were said to train their resistance to poison by microdosing toxic herbs or animal venoms. Legend has it that certain guild leaders were completely immune to their own poisons. Although, again, historians question the truth of this. Still, you'd give a lot to not have to fear your soup every night. You learn to keep multiple layers of secrets. You start to lie even when you don't need to, just to stay in practice. At some point, you realize you're dreaming in code. Your subconscious whispering phrases like "back door left unlocked" or "watch for the tall one's limp" while you sleep. And you keep secrets from yourself too, like the fact that you still flinch when someone screams, or that you sometimes catch your own reflection and don't recognize the eyes looking back. One night, you're ordered to sit with a man before his execution, not to comfort him, just to listen. He's a traitor, apparently. Try to defect. The higher-ups want his mind unraveled before his body is disposed of. You sit in silence while he talks. He tells you about the outside world, about how sunlight feels when you don't have to squint against guilt, about what it's like to love someone and not worry they've been paid to stab you in your sleep. He even jokes, badly, about goats. You don't laugh, but you don't forget either. After they take him away, you spend the rest of the night awake, watching the door, not out of fear, out of some strange, unnameable ache that settles behind your ribs like a knot. You understand now. The order doesn't just train you to kill, it trains you to erase, not just others, yourself too. One day, you're called into the archive chamber. It's a cold room with shelves of sealed scrolls, names, maps, and blood-stained ledgers. A senior member shows you a list. There's a name. It's familiar. Too familiar. Your own. Your handler smiles and says, "Everyone's name gets archived, eventually. It just means you're valuable enough to be tracked." You nod. You pretend that doesn't make you want to run until your lungs turn inside out. But where would you run? The world outside doesn't know you exist. And if it did, it wouldn't want you. So you keep quiet, always calculating. And that's how you survive. For now. You're getting better at being invisible. Unfortunately, that doesn't make your job any easier. Because here's the thing. No one tells you when you sign up. Actually, you never signed up, did you? Stealth isn't magic. It's not a shimmery cloak that makes you vanish. It's a sweaty, aching, blister-causing art form, and it hates you. Every mission begins with hours of planning and ends with your legs cramping from hiding in the same position so long you start questioning the nature of time. You crouch under wagons, lie in muddy drainage ditches, squeeze behind tapestry-covered stone walls where spiders have clearly claimed squatters' rights. You learn to blend in with your environment like a particularly sarcastic mushroom. But not because you want to, because you have to. Stealth is the difference between finishing a mission or finishing your life. And don't let those dramatic paintings fool you. Cloaked figures slipping between torch-lit corridors in one fluid motion. Pure fantasy. In reality, your cloak snags on every loose nail and uneven stone. It drags in puddles. It smells. Sometimes it flaps at the worst possible moment. Like when a guard turns and mutters, "Did you hear that?" You've spent hours mastering how to walk across different surfaces. Stone, wood, thatched roof, dead leaves, wet hay, frozen gravel. Yes, that's a thing. And yes, it sounds like someone chewing rocks. You know which boots squeak and which ones you have to rub with ash to quiet. Sometimes you move through castles so slowly that your knees lock. One time, you held your breath for almost 2 minutes while a cat stared directly at you from a window ledge. The cat blinked first. You consider that a win. Real stealth doesn't look cool. It looks uncomfortable. You spend most of your time slightly hunched, slightly damp, and always 3 seconds away from disaster. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins actually had structured stealth training, or if most of it came from battlefield experience. But judging by how many castle guards were mysteriously found with crossbow bolts in their backs, someone was doing something right, or very wrong, depending on perspective. You once had to cross a banquet hall ceiling using only the rafters. Do you know how loud old wood is? Every step sounded like it had its own opinion about your life choices. You made it across, but you still dream of that one creak that almost gave you away. Then there are the distractions. Your guild teaches you all the classics: tossing pebbles, staged arguments, collapsing a tray of apples. Just when the sentry turns his head, one guy in your order swears by sneezing loudly from the opposite direction. It works. You hate that it works. But sometimes it's not about distraction. It's about disguise. You learn how to walk like a soldier, how to mimic the bow-legged gait of a stable hand, how to carry a tray like a kitchen servant without flinching when a guard leers. You once spent a week shadowing a washerwoman just to mimic the way she balanced a bucket on her hip. And then you used that disguise to sneak into a bishop's residence, killed a man, left the bucket, still one of your cleanest missions. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Renaissance-era assassin guilds reportedly used theatrical performers as trainers, actors who taught them how to play roles convincingly. Whether that's fact or apocryphal remains unclear, but it would explain why you now instinctively gesture with your left hand when pretending to be right-handed. Oh, and don't even get started on smells. Smell gives you away faster than sound. Too clean? Suspicious. Smell like lavender. Might as well shout, "Assassin incoming." You've learned to roll in hay, dust yourself with chimney ash, even smear a little garlic under your collar just to pass for local. At night, you dream of being weightless, of floating through walls, of never again having to worry about floorboards, or squelching mud, or someone's drunk cousin deciding to relieve himself in the alley you're hiding in. Yes, that happened. Your back is a roadmap of bruises. Your fingers are calloused from gripping ledges, door frames, and ceiling beams. Your knees are basically made of regret. And still, you do it, night after night, because the order demands it, because this is what survival looks like. Holding still when your muscles scream, moving when your instincts say, wait, breathing through panic, and never, ever making a sound unless it's your target's final breath. The closest thing to a reward? That silent moment after the mission, when you return unseen, when someone at the compound looks up, sees you alive, and says nothing, because silence? That's how you say, well done, around here. You don't smile. You don't even relax. You just prepare for the next mission, because if you don't, you won't need to worry about stealth anymore. You think you've gotten through the worst of it. Mud, silence, stealth, aching muscles. But then comes training day. And this time, it isn't about sneaking or spying. No, this is about pain, precision, and seeing how many times you can get knocked down before something inside you gives up. Weapons training in the Order is not gentle. There are no wooden swords or padded armor unless you're using it to teach someone else. You train with real blades, real bows, real weights, because if your weapon fails, you fail. And failure, as you've probably figured out by now, doesn't come with second chances. Your trainer, he doesn't blink, doesn't smile. You're pretty sure he eats gravel for breakfast. He never raises his voice. He doesn't need to. The sound of his footsteps is enough to make every muscle in your back clench. You've seen him break a man's wrist just by correcting his grip, and you train every day. Rain, snow, fever, twisted ankle. You're still out there, dodging and striking and bleeding. A pulled muscle means you train with the other side. A bruised rib, wrap it and keep swinging. It starts simple. Daggers. You learn to throw them with enough force to pierce cloth and flesh. You learn to slip one into a neck in less than a heartbeat. Then it's on to short swords, garrots, even hat pins. Yes, hat pins. One of the most discreet murder tools in your kit. You can kill a man with one. You can also pin a note to his chest if you're feeling theatrical. You get tested on how fast you can go from empty hands to a kill. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't, and sometimes your partner does the job for you before you finish blinking. That's how you learn. Here's a fringe historical tidbit for your bedtime file. Some assassin guilds were said to use live animals, snakes, rats, even wild dogs, in mock training arenas to test your calm under pressure. Your guild? They prefer other trainees, because nothing builds focus like knowing your partner will stab you if you hesitate. You've broken your nose twice. You've cracked ribs, dislocated fingers, and lost a chunk of your earlobe to a misjudged dodge. There is no safe. There is only next. One of your worst injuries came not during a mission, but during what they called reflex hour. You were blindfolded and ordered to navigate a room full of swinging obstacles, low beams, and surprise. Attackers with blunted weapons. Blunted, meaning less likely to kill you immediately. You made it out, but your shoulder hasn't moved right since. Historians still debate whether formalized combat systems existed within these secret orders, or if they simply adapted what was available. Monastic martial arts, battlefield tactics, or even folk wrestling. Whatever the truth, your training feels ancient and improvised, like someone just decided pain is the best teacher, and everyone nodded along. You learn rhythm, muscle memory, timing. You can disarm a man while yawning. You can slide a blade into a soft spot between ribs with the delicacy of a seamstress threading a needle. You're not strong, but you're fast and you're smart, and that's what matters in this business. But here's the catch. You're never good enough. Every time you master a technique, they change the conditions. Now you're fighting uphill. Now you're doing it while injured. Now you're doing it in the dark, in silence, while memorizing the pattern of a target's coat buttons. And if you start getting too confident, they bring in someone better. Someone who fights dirty. Someone who breaks the rules. You get humiliated. You get hurt. You learn that arrogance is just another vulnerability. You remember one lesson best. You were 17, tired, too cocky. You went in fast, sharp, confident, and your opponent, an older assassin you'd barely noticed before. Thin, quiet, eyes like dust. He floored you in 5 seconds. You woke up with a cracked jaw and a note pinned to your tunic. Never forget how fragile you are. Since then, you haven't. Training, becomes a kind of ritual, a way to purge doubt, fear, even identity. It strips you down, rebuilds you as something that moves with purpose and strikes without hesitation. But somewhere, buried deep beneath the scar tissue, you still feel it, that tiny flicker of the self you used to be, the child who once asked what this life was for. You don't ask anymore, because now you know. It's not about justice. It's not even about the mission. It's about survival, and pain is just the price of staying useful. There's this idea people have, probably from books or those old scroll illustrations, that assassins live a glamorous life of moonlit rooftops and dramatic final whispers. You know the truth. Mostly, it's about exhaustion, long nights, terrible food, and worst of all, no sleep. You learn pretty early that sleep is a luxury, a dangerous one. You never fall asleep easily, not because you're afraid of nightmares, though you have plenty of those, but because sleep means letting go of control, of awareness, and that's something you've been trained to avoid, like the plague. Literally, you nap in short bursts, 20 minutes here, maybe an hour if you're really lucky. You learn how to sleep on stone floors, on moving carts, in rafters, under porches. You once dozed off, standing up in a priest's confessional booth. That was a weird morning. Every time you close your eyes, you calculate. How long before someone notices you? How fast can you wake up if the door creaks? You've trained yourself to react instantly to the sound of footsteps, even if it's a rat. You've kicked more than a few crates across the room by accident. One time, it was a monk. He was very understanding, all things considered. But let's not forget the other reason you can't sleep. You're on constant rotation for night watch. You take turns guarding the compound's perimeter, sitting in icy shadows, while the wind tries to convince your bones to give up. No fires, of course. Fire is light, and light is risk. It's during one of these shifts that you realize something strange. You no longer expect rest. You're surprised when your body doesn't hurt. You almost miss the tension when it's gone. Historians still argue whether assassin guilds really imposed full-scale, round-the-clock surveillance on their own members, or whether that level of paranoia came later. But in your case, it's real. You're being watched. Always. By your peers. By handlers. Sometimes even by people you've never met. And sometimes by your own target. Because the hunter gets hunted too. Your sleep deprivation isn't just physical. It seeps into your thoughts. You forget things. You start hallucinating. Just a little. You think you see movement in places that are still. Hear a whisper where there's only wind. It makes you slower, sloppier. That's the irony. The very thing your survival depends on, rest, is the one thing you can't afford to take. Here's a quirky tidbit you wouldn't expect. In some regions, assassins were given herbal tonics or wake potions made from things like poppy seeds, ground yew, and powdered beetle shells. You've tried one of those. Once. It worked, technically. You stayed awake for 36 hours and then passed out while halfway through a roof climb. Your hip still clicks from that fall. The real trick isn't just staying awake, it's staying sharp. That means meditation, breathing control, mental exercises. Your order trains you to recite entire historical timelines backward in your head, or mentally map escape routes through towns you've never seen. Anything to keep your mind from turning to porridge. Sometimes, during night watch, you try to remember what sleep felt like before the order, before you became a blade. Did you ever sleep soundly? Did your dreams ever not include blood? One night, while stationed outside a crumbling abbey, you see something that stops you cold. A small farmhouse in the distance, lit from within. You glimpse a woman tucking in a child by candlelight. No weapons, no shadows, just warmth. You watch for a long time, and for a brief second, you feel like maybe you miss something. You're not sure what, but it's gone. You turn away and tighten your cloak. Your handler once told you, sleep is for the dead, and if you're not careful, so is everything else. So you make do. You nap between missions. You meditate during briefings. You sleep with your hand wrapped around your knife handle. And when you do dream, it's always strange. You're never you. You're the merchant you tailed last week, the innkeeper whose voice you mimicked, the boy who looked too long in the alleyway. Sometimes, you're even your target, feeling the blade press in just before waking. You tell no one. You don't yawn during drills. You don't slump during lectures. You pretend everything is fine. But your eyes, they tell the truth. Red-ribbed, heavy, always scanning, always waiting. You tell yourself you'll rest after this next mission, after the next target, after the next escape. But you never do, because in this life, rest is the most dangerous weakness of all. The rooftops are slick with dew, and your foot slips, just a little, enough to send a shiver through your spine, but not enough to fall. Not this time. You dig your fingers into the rough stone ledge and keep crawling, inch by inch, across the rooftop like some cursed lizard in the moonlight. Welcome to your new skill set. Medieval parkour, without the fancy sneakers, without the safety nets, without, well, common sense. Your missions increasingly demand one thing above all else: mobility. Getting from point A to point B without being seen, heard, or caught. And in the twisting guts of medieval cities, that means you go up, over roofs, across ledges, through upper story windows that are smaller than your shoulders. And it's never as cool as it looks in the scrolls. You're not just running, you're climbing, shimmying, dropping, leaping, rolling, all while carrying gear, weapons, and sometimes poison that could kill a horse if it cracks in your pocket. One time, you slipped while scaling a bell tower and landed flat on your back in a pig cart. The pigs were fine. You weren't. Historians still argue whether rooftop travel was a legitimate tactic among medieval spies and assassins, or if it's just another bit of romanticized fiction added centuries later. But you can confirm it absolutely was real and terrible. Most rooftops are made of thatch, clay tiles, or wooden shingles. All of them want you to fall. Thatched roofs collapse if you step in the wrong spot. Tiles shatter. Wood creaks like it's auditioning for a haunted play. And heaven forbid it rains, because if it rains, you're basically ice skating across a sloped, splintered death trap. You develop a strange intimacy with chimneys, dormers, and laundry lines. You know exactly how far you can jump from one rooftop to another. Whether you can make the gap while carrying a body, you can't. And which rooftops host roosters who will absolutely rat you out at 2 a.m. You've leapt over boiling kitchens, darted between thunderous church bells, and once accidentally joined a rooftop wedding procession for a noble couple's cat. You stayed for a slice of cake before vanishing again into the darkness. That was a good night. But let's be honest, most nights aren't like that. Most nights involve scraped knees, bloodied palms, and the constant fear that one loose shingle means a fall that ends everything. Your guild teaches you how to fall safely, tuck, roll, land soft. But there's only so much physics can forgive. One girl tried to dive from a second-story window and hit a wagon wheel. Her legs snapped like firewood. She didn't come back. You train for this every day, climbing rope ladders, scaling training walls slicked with oil, timing your jumps between moving platforms. Your muscles ache in places you didn't know existed, and you never stop training, because the moment you do, gravity reminds you who's boss. Here's a strange detail. Some orders swore by goat hide boots, with ridged soles for better traction, supposedly modeled after mountain goats. You tried a pair once. They smelled awful and made you sound like a smug blacksmith clapping down cobblestones. You went back to soft-soled leather. You're told that rooftops are your escape routes. When the mission goes wrong, and it will, you run high, not low. Crowds block, guards trap. But the rooftops? They're open sky and stone, except when they're not. Except when you leap and realize too late that a section's been torn out for repairs. Except when you misjudge a ledge and catch yourself by the wrist dangling above a courtyard where guards are playing dice and wondering why it suddenly smells like fear. One time, you had to shimmy sideways across a 5-inch ledge for 20 feet because there was no other way into the target's tower below you. A moat. In the moat. Something that moved. Something big. You never looked down again after that mission. The rooftops don't care if you're tired or sick or injured. They expect your best, or they take the rest. You get used to balancing your weight perfectly, distributing pressure across both feet. You can now walk across a crooked beam in total darkness, barefoot, while carrying a dagger in your teeth. You've done it. Twice. Once successfully. You stop fearing heights eventually. What you fear instead is the moment after the jump, that half-second of air, that suspended silence where your body has committed, but your mind hasn't caught up. That's the moment where assassins live or die, and yet, sometimes it feels worth it when you crest a ridge and see the sleeping city below, torches flickering like a map of forgotten stars. When the wind brushes your hood and no one knows you're there. In those rare moments, you feel like something more than a tool. You feel free, but only until the next tile shifts under your foot. Then you're falling again, literally or mentally, back into the mission, because the rooftops aren't your friends. They're just the shortest distance between you and your next regret. You're back from the rooftops. You've cleaned the mud off your boots and the blood off your sleeves. Hopefully, not your own. But now comes a different kind of challenge. It's not about running or hiding. It's about knowing when to stop breathing, when to measure a drop, when to gamble with death itself. Tonight's lesson, poison. They call it an art, But let's be honest, it's a gamble, wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in the occasional rat spleen. You never really master poison, you just stop losing to it. The order starts you off small: harmless herbs, sleep tonics, substances that'll only make someone mildly embarrassed if misused. Hiccups, rashes, maybe a sudden fondness for yodeling. But soon, you're dealing with the real stuff. The kind of powder that can stop a heart faster than a blade. The kind of liquid that needs to be stored in vials, wrapped in oiled cloth and sealed with wax, lest one drop decide your fate. And yes, you test it on animals, on fruit, on meat. Once, horrifyingly, on yourself. Not by choice, of course. That time, your instructor accidentally spilled a small amount of belladonna into your soup, said it was part of your final test. You hallucinated for 6 hours and saw your future self telling you to quit this job and become a beekeeper. You're still not sure it was a hallucination. Historians still argue whether real assassin guilds systematically used poison or whether it was more of an improvisational tool, convenient when needed, but too unpredictable for regular use. But for you, it's become a staple, a backup, a signature, and an ever-present risk. Because poison doesn't always behave. Sometimes it clots. Sometimes it evaporates. Sometimes the victim doesn't react the way they're supposed to. And sometimes, this is the worst one, they switch cups with someone else. That's a tough one to explain. Your guild gives you recipes, but they're more like loose poems than chemistry. A pinch of henbane, a whisper of you, stirred only by moonlight. It's as vague as it is deadly. You've started to think the recipes are half test, half joke. One entry literally read, "If it smells like almonds, run." Still, you get good at it. You learn the difference between a slow death and a quick one, between pain and silence, between a lesson and a message. You develop a strange respect for poison. It doesn't require strength. It doesn't need to sneak. It just waits. It's patient. Like you. Of course, delivery is half the battle. A poisoned goblet is cinematic, but risky. You prefer more subtle methods, dusted onto parchment, laced into clothing seams, brushed on doorknobs. One time, you baked it into a pie. No, really. You actually learned to cook, just to make that pie. Your instructor was furious. Not at the method, just at how long you took crimping the edges. Here's a fun fringe detail. In some medieval courts, food tasters were used not just for kings, but for high-ranking clergy. Turns out, even bishops made enemies. And you've impersonated a food taster once. Slipped in, served the soup, vanished. The target died 2 hours later. You never even entered the room again. But poisoning isn't just about tools and toxins. It's psychological warfare. It's whispers of paranoia. You don't always need the poison to work. Sometimes, you just need people to think it's out there. One nobleman canceled his feast for a month after receiving a rose dusted with white powder. Flour, just flour. But his cook resigned in fear. Mission accomplished. And yet, with all this knowledge, you still fear it. Because poison doesn't forgive mistakes. You've seen fellow assassins fall ill from mishandling wolfsbane. One trainee lost most of her eyesight from mishandling arsenic dust. She survived, but she's not sent on missions anymore. She teaches now. Soft voice, hard lessons. Your guild keeps a locked cabinet of final choices, vials meant for your own use. If caught, you've held one. It's small, warm from your palm. You wonder what it would taste like, what it would feel like coursing through your system. Would it be fast, peaceful, regretful? You put it back. For now, you catalog everything in your memory. Effects, delays, antidotes. You know which poisons stain the lips, which leave no trace, which make it look like a heart attack, which mimic the plague. It's a dark, vast, terrifying library you carry in your head, a whispering archive of everything that can end a life. And sometimes, late at night, you wonder how many people you've killed that didn't even know it was you. How many drank, coughed, twitched, and never knew the blade was invisible. That's what makes poison different from the dagger. It's not about confrontation. It's not about dominance, or skill, or speed. It's about certainty. And in a world where nothing is certain, not trust, not sleep, not even your own memories, poison gives you one rare gift: control. There's something oddly reassuring about a dagger. It fits in your palm. It does what it's told. It has rules. But when it comes to what you wear, that's where things get surprisingly complicated. Because let's face it, medieval fashion wasn't built with assassins in mind. You need to blend in, look like the stable hand, the servant, the scribe. But you also need your tools, your blades, your poison vials, your rope, your backup rope, your smoke powder, when available, your emergency coin stash, and sometimes even a message scroll tucked in your sock. You don't just get dressed, you assemble yourself. Your cloak, of course, is the signature piece. You're issued one early, rough wool, dark gray or black, depending on your region. Frayed enough to look poor, clean enough to not attract suspicion. The hood covers your face without casting dramatic shadows, because drama is for plays, and getting noticed gets you killed. But here's the thing about cloaks. They snag on railings, on nails, on overly affectionate goats. You once got hung up on a rose bush for 10 full minutes. It was deeply undignified. You've adjusted your outfit 100 times. Hidden pockets under the sleeves, ties instead of buckles. Buckles clink. Even your boots are specially reinforced to reduce heel noise. But nothing ever feels quite right, because the more tools you carry, the more you risk sounding like a walking cutlery drawer. Here's a quirky fact to stitch into your nightshirt. Some real medieval spies were said to sew tiny daggers into their doublets or line their cloaks with wire mesh to stop arrows. Fashionable and functional. Unfortunately, wire mesh makes your shoulders creak like a rusty gate, so your guild discouraged it after one unfortunate stealthy mission turned into a street concert. And don't even start on the weather. Winter, layer up, but not too bulky. You still need to move. Summer, sweat until your tunic could be classified as a small, mobile swamp. Rain, everything gets heavier, louder, and clammier. One time your leather bracer shrank and nearly cut off your circulation. Took 2 hours and a bucket of pig fat to get it off. Let's not forget armor, or the complete lack of it. You don't get chainmail. Chainmail jingles. You wish you got padding. Padding's heavy. Your protection, speed, awareness, and the hope that if something's about to stab you, you hear it coming first. But your appearance matters just as much as your performance. Sometimes, your orders are to dress like a noble's attendant. That means washing, grooming, walking like someone who's not constantly checking for exits. And those moments, they're surprisingly vulnerable. Because when you look clean, you feel seen. And being seen is terrifying. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins used disguises regularly or whether that's a literary embellishment. But think about it. How else would you get past guards? Through kitchens or onto a barge with a closed to public sign painted on the hull? You once spent an entire mission pretending to be a wandering friar. Robes, sandals, the whole act. Sang hymns off-key for authenticity. You even gave a blessing to a baker's wife who kissed your hand and offered you a pie. It was poisoned. Not yours, someone else's. You stole the pie for later and prevented a noble's accidental death. You got a pat on the head for that. Real warm and fuzzy stuff. But that disguise came with its own problems. Robes are terrible for running. You tripped on the hem while escaping and nearly rolled down 3 flights of monastery stairs. Ever since, you've quietly preferred trousers. Even if the stitching itches. And pockets? Forget it. Medieval clothing isn't big on convenience. Everything's either in a pouch on your belt or hidden under layers. You've become unnaturally good at retrieving items without looking. Your record is producing a lockpick, a bone ring, and a folded map, all in under 10 seconds, while pretending to stretch. Your guild teaches you how to tie knots that release silently, how to fold cloth so it doubles as a bandage or a gag. You even learn how to braid your hair, if it's long, in a way that keeps it from being grabbed mid-fight. Function always comes first. Sometimes, though, you let yourself be just a little vain. You adjust your hood so the shadows fall just right. You choose a deeper blue sash instead of brown. Not because it helps, just because you want to feel a bit more like the storybooks say, like a phantom, a shadow, a legend, even if you know that in reality, you look more like a tired chimney sweep with extra knives. And on the rare days when you're not on a mission, you find yourself dressing simpler. No layers, no straps, no weight, just a tunic and soft shoes. Nothing hidden, no purpose. You almost feel normal, almost, but you still check your reflection, just in case, because even out of uniform, you're still an assassin, and even a ghost has to keep up appearances. You've completed a mission. You made the kill. You slipped away unseen, your cloak wet with mist, and your boots echoing faintly on cobbled stone. Back at the safe house, you report in, drop off the satchel of letters from the target's study, and wash your hands until they stop shaking. Then comes your reward, a pouch of coins. Cold, heavy, and shockingly underwhelming. This is the part no one talks about. The money. You'd think that for someone risking their neck on a nightly basis, someone trained from childhood to silence nobles and outmaneuver spies, you'd be rolling in gold. Yeah, no, you're not. Assassins are expensive to train, but they're also disposable. Your guild doesn't pay you for loyalty. They expect that what they pay for is completion, and they pay just enough to keep you too tired to run and too funded to starve. It's a neat little trick. You get coin, sure, but you also get followed, watched, monitored. Your handler knows where every coin goes. You don't get to save up for retirement or buy a vineyard in the countryside. You get a bunk, a meal, and maybe a new pair of boots if yours fall apart during a chase. Historians still debate how assassin guilds handled finances. Were they independent contractors, agents of the crown, mercenaries with benefits? Most records, shockingly, don't survive long when written by people who kill for a living. What little we do know comes from intercepted letters and trial testimonies, often delivered under duress, which, let's be honest, isn't the most reliable HR paperwork. You once tried to keep a ledger, a secret one, just to feel like you were in control, just to see how much your life was worth. You stopped after the third page. It felt like counting the bricks in your own prison wall. There's a hierarchy, of course. Higher-ranking assassins, those who've been in the game long enough to become part of the institution, have better privileges. A private room, a personal tailor. Rumor has it, one of them even has a bathhouse token that never expires. But for you live close to the floorboards. You eat what's cooked. You sleep where there's space, and your coin pouch never stays full for long. Here's a quirky fact. Some orders reportedly paid bonuses, not in coin, but in favors, pardons, letters of passage, access to hidden libraries, or even secret names of future targets. You once got paid in a loaf of bread and a coded letter that turned out to be the entrance to a secret escape tunnel under a monastery. You were disappointed until that same tunnel saved your life a month later. But the money, what little you get, doesn't come without strings. Spend it too openly, and people notice. Buy something nice, and someone wonders why the quiet servant has silk gloves. You've seen a man killed for purchasing a horse too fine for his rank. Better to stay invisible, better to spend like a pauper, even when your purse says otherwise. That invisibility isn't just about safety, it's policy. The order doesn't want you building a life. That would mean attachments, weakness, escape routes. So you rent a room above a butcher's shop, but never decorate it. You stash a coin under a floorboard, but forget it's there. You carry your silver in a pouch with a false bottom, half hoping it'll be stolen. You don't care. It's not real. None of it is. The one time you tried to do something nice with your earnings, bought a trinket from a market stall, a little wooden bird carved with care, you lost it within a week, or maybe it was taken. Either way, the message was clear. You're not here to collect. You're here to serve. You sometimes dream of escape, not in a big way, not some blaze of glory, drop everything and flee moment, just disappearing one day, not returning from a mission, dropping your purse in the river, vanishing into the woods, letting the guild think you died. But the thing is, you've been conditioned not to trust your own freedom. Even the idea of it feels wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. You wouldn't know what to do, how to live, how to wake up without an order tucked under your door. The money, in the end, becomes a joke, a symbol, proof that you did the job, proof that you're still breathing. It's not wealth, it's a marker of your usefulness. And usefulness is the only currency that really matters. So when they hand you your coin, you don't count it anymore. You just pocket it, nod, and walk away. Because deep down, you know the truth. You're already paid in full. You'd think assassinating a noble would be like any other job. Quiet blade, quick escape, back to base in time for cold stew. But no, it's never that simple. Because nobles, unlike merchants or wandering heretics, come with baggage, not just political alliances and expensive cloaks, though they have plenty of those, but guards, routines, unpredictable moods, and a maddening love for last-minute plans. You're sent on your first noble target when you're barely 18. He's a viscount, loves falconry, hates soup, sleeps with a dagger under his pillow, and a taster who looks like he could wrestle oxen. Your handler hands you a parchment with 3 words. Make it clean. Right. Clean. In a world where this man takes 3-hour baths and sleeps in a fortress guarded by 12 knights and a hallway full of moody tapestries, nothing about this mission feels clean. You watch him for days. Pose as a scullery servant, then as a choir boy, then as a stable hand. You learn everything. When he yawns, when he scratches his left ear, when he flirts with the steward's daughter, badly. But a pattern never emerges. He's chaotic. He cancels dinners without warning, stays up late, drinking with monks, wanders off in the morning just to feed ducks. Ducks. Eventually, you see your opening. A hunting trip. Fewer guards, more confusion. The nobility loves their forests, and forests, bless them, are full of sharp rocks, deep bogs, and plausible deniability. You make your move in a narrow gully when the Viscount dismounts to relieve himself behind a tree. You slip in, silent, precise, quick blade to the side. He gasps, then collapses onto a patch of moss with a confused frown on his lips. You vanish into the brush. Mission complete. Except it isn't. Because assassinating a noble means assassinating someone connected. His cousin is a duke. His sister is married to a powerful bishop. His death triggers a slow-burning panic across the court. Whispers, investigations, accusations, the kind of attention your guild very much does not enjoy. Historians still debate how often assassins were actually employed to kill nobles versus manipulating them or blackmailing them into compliance. Evidence is murky because nobles die all the time. Plague, war, poisoning, spontaneous jousting accidents. But when they die quietly, with no marks, no mess, someone like you is often involved. The real danger isn't just the kill, it's the aftermath. The noble's family may hire their own investigators. The local lord may increase security tenfold. Someone may put a price on your head, not because they know who you are, but because they don't, and that drives them mad. You're sent into hiding for a while after that mission, told to lay low, which in your line of work means move every 3 days and sleep in barns. You end up in a fishing village, pretending to be mute. You actually start forgetting how to speak. Eventually, the panic dies down. Nobles are dramatic, but also forgetful. They move on, remarry, plot revenge dinners. And you? You get another parchment, another name, another title. This time, it's a baroness. You sigh and start brushing the hay out of your cloak. Here's a fun fringe detail. In some regions, nobles kept decoys, stand-ins trained to mimic their movements, wear their clothes, even eat their meals. It was a paranoid tactic, but occasionally effective. You once spent 3 days tracking a count, only to realize too late you'd been following his body double. The real one? Off seducing a merchant's wife. You still shudder thinking about that wasted effort. Nobles also love rituals. They do everything with a flourish. They pray in special chapels. They dine in courses so slow you could write a poem between bites. That gives you windows. But it also means every room is full of people. Servants, courtiers, the jester, someone always watching, someone always talking. Sometimes the goal isn't to kill the noble, but to send a message, break into their chamber, and leave behind a single coin, or a thorn, or a lock of their own hair. Creepy? Yes. Effective? Very. You once crept into a duchess's solar and moved everything precisely 3 inches to the left. She didn't leave her room for 2 weeks afterward. Mission accomplished. But if you do have to kill, it better be clean. No splash, no scream, no trail, and if you're lucky, no body. Disappearances are easier to manage, harder to investigate, easier to deny. The worst noble you ever had to kill? A count who never slept in the same room twice, wore armor to bed, traveled with a pet, lynx that could smell fear, and definitely smelled yours. Took you 2 weeks to arrange an accidental crossbow malfunction during a tourney. Still one of your proudest shots. Assassinating nobles is complicated, frustrating, dangerous, and occasionally absurd. But it pays slightly better. And if nothing else, it teaches you one thing very clearly. Even the people who rule kingdoms bleed the same. You're coughing into your sleeve, trying not to sound too alive. Your skin burns, your breath rattles. You're on a mission, but it's the 3rd week of a spreading sickness. And guess what? Disease doesn't care if you've trained to become invisible. This time, it's a fever. Last time, it was boils. Before that, something that made everyone smell like rotting onions. And every time, your guild gives the same instruction. Complete the mission anyway. You don't get sick days. You don't get masks. You barely get clean. Water? Medieval assassins? They're not immune. You bleed like everyone else. You just have to pretend you don't. Some of your instructors claim to know herbal remedies. They toss you dried roots, bitter teas, and pungent salves that make you feel more poisoned than healed. One of them swears by a garlic and vinegar bath. Another recommends leeching. Yes, actual leeches. You tried it once. You'd rather fight 3 armored guards than do that again. Historians still argue whether assassin orders adapted special protocols during times of plague or pandemic. Did they isolate, rotate operatives, delay missions? Some say yes. Others say the orders saw plague as opportunity, with cities gripped by fear, fewer guards on the streets, and more bodies piling up. It was easier to slip in, do your work, and disappear into the sickness. Which sounds clever, until you're the one trying to scale a wet wall with a wheezing chest and fevered hands. During the last outbreak, you were tasked with a job inside a quarantine zone. That meant sneaking through boarded alleys, dodging corpses, and pretending to be a plague doctor just to reach the target's townhouse. Your disguise worked until a group of terrified townsfolk mistook you for someone infected and threw rocks. You don't remember how you got out, just that you woke up with a cracked rib and no boots. And the mission? Still finished, still delivered. There's a twisted logic to it. If you can work during the worst times, you'll survive anything. The guild doesn't say this aloud, of course. They just hand you the vial, the parchment, the coin, and expect you to figure it out. One of your comrades, an older assassin, missing a few fingers, once said, "The plague is just the world's way of thinning the guards." He wasn't wrong. You've snuck past gatehouses with half their watch coughing into their sleeves. Poison a guard's soup during flu season? No one even investigates. But it's not always so clean. Sickness spreads, even among assassins. And when someone falls ill inside the compound, it's a quiet panic. No one wants to admit it. No one wants to be next. You've seen bunks suddenly empty, rooms silently sealed, cloaks burned. One time, a boy no older than 14 got a hacking cough. He begged to be kept on rotation, promised he was fine. He vanished the next morning. No word, no trace. Just a new trainee in his bed the day after. You told yourself it was coincidence. You lied. Here's a quirky, if unsettling, fringe fact. In some areas, guilds were rumored to infect their enemies deliberately. Plague-dipped arrows, rotten meat delivered to castles, contaminated garments. Whether that's truth or myth, you've definitely watched your own guild boil everything you bring back from missions, including your boots. But working through illness isn't just physical, it's psychological. You lose clarity, your balance falters, your breath shortens, and worst of all, your fear grows. Not the fear of dying, that's always there. The fear of failing, of being deemed too weak, too sick, replaceable. You've carried out a mission with a splitting migraine, and half your vision gone. You've chased a target while vomiting between rooftops. You once assassinated a man during a fever dream and genuinely don't remember how. You came back with a bloody knife and a stained note that simply read, "Done." No one questioned you, but those moments stick with you because they reveal something raw and awful, that you're not a ghost. You're not a legend. You're human, fragile, flawed, killable. So what do? You keep going. You wrap your coughs in linen. You sleep sitting up so your lungs don't seize. You double-check every step, every breath, every vial, because even one mistake could expose you, or worse, compromise the mission. And when it gets really bad, when your body shakes, and your vision swims, and your fingers can barely hold the blade, you press forward anyway, because in this life, there's no room for sick days, only silence and survival. You walk into a room, and people don't flinch. That's the goal. You're the invisible one, the forgettable presence, the shadow in the corner. But no matter how still you stand, there's something about you that lingers. A smell, a feeling, a weight. You know what it is. You smell like fear and old leather. Let's be clear. Medieval hygiene is not your friend. Soap is expensive, bathing is infrequent, and deodorant hasn't even been imagined yet. And you spend your nights sweating in heavy wool, sprinting over rooftops, rolling through alleys, hiding under livestock carts, and occasionally swimming through sewage channels because someone forgot to unlock the cellar door. Your boots are soaked half the time. Your gloves are stiff with old oil. Your cloak, it has absorbed enough city grime to qualify as its own biome. And still, you have to look and smell harmless. The guild teaches you tricks. A dab of lavender near the collar, dried herbs sewn into the hem, charcoal under the arms. You've used them all, and you've still cleared out an entire pub once, just by raising your arm to reach for a cup. The barmaid gagged. The dog barked. You left. Here's a fringe tidbit for your mental soapbox. Some medieval assassins reportedly carried crushed pine needles or vinegar-soaked cloths in their pouches to mask odors. It worked about as well as you'd expect, meaning it mostly made you smell like a Christmas roast gone terribly wrong. The thing is, it's not just the physical scent, it's the aura. You carry tension, always watching, always braced. People pick up on that. They don't know why they avoid you in a crowd, why they shift when you walk by, but they do shift. You're like a bad omen, wrapped in leather and secrets. Clothes don't help. They're rarely washed. Fabric gets heavy with damp, smoke, blood. You try to air things out, but laundry takes time. Time means vulnerability. Vulnerability means risk. So you just live with it. You've learned how to blend, how to mimic gestures, but you can't fake the smell of someone who's never slept in a sewer. The upper class carries cloves and rose water. You carry damp wool, brass polish, and something that might be burnt onions. And yet, sometimes you use it. That stench, that aura, it warns. You once leaned close to a guard, smiling faintly, and watched him flinch. You've seen things, he muttered. Been places. You didn't answer. He let you through. Historians often overlook the sensory details of espionage, how texture, scent, and posture all play roles in deception. But anyone who's lived this life knows being undetectable isn't about vanishing, it's about appearing ordinary. And you're not ordinary. Not anymore. You once tried to cleanse yourself completely, bathed twice in one day, washed your cloak, scrubbed your gear, wore clean linen. You looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. You smelled like someone safe, someone soft. The mission failed that night. You were too clean, too stiff. The target saw you coming. After that, you went back to the basics. You embraced the grime, the stink, the aura, because sometimes the smell of blood and leather tells its own story, a story that says, I've done worse, and I'm ready to do it again. One time, you tried perfume, just once, a drop of imported sandalwood oil from a noblewoman's chamber. It was subtle, warm, you felt almost human. You wore it into a mission. A servant noticed. You smell nice, she said. You froze. Too much attention. One phrase. That's all it takes. Never again. Since then, your rule is simple. If you can smell it, so can they. So, you walk like you belong, but you smell like regret. You blend into crowds, but you reek of somewhere you shouldn't be. And that, weirdly, is part of the camouflage. The stable hands don't bathe. The soldiers reek of iron and sweat. The peasants stink of the fields. You fit in just fine. You're no longer repelled by your own odor. You've gone nose blind. That's probably a mercy, but you do miss the smell of soap, the way a fresh tunic felt, the faint, fleeting scent of flowers on someone's sleeve in spring. You miss all of that, but you miss it quietly, like everything else. Because in your world, being clean is a liability, and stinking, that just means you're still alive. You're bleeding. Not a lot, just enough to worry you. A clean slice across your thigh, courtesy of a hidden blade in the belt of a merchant who was supposed to be unarmed. You make it back to the safe house, limping, sweating, the world spinning just a little more than usual. And that's when the real fun begins. Because now it's time for medieval medicine. Your guild's version of medical care is tucked into a corner of the compound that smells like boiling onions, mold, and the vague regret of generations past. There's no physician, not really, just an older man with trembling hands and a collection of mismatched tools. Some of them are sharp, some of them are stained. One of them, you're pretty sure, used to be a gardening spade. He waves you onto a wooden table that rocks when you sit. He doesn't ask questions. He does mutter something about humors. You don't ask which ones. You just lie back and prepare for the worst. Your wound gets packed with herbs you can't name, bound tight with linen that may or may not have been boiled this month. Then he leeches you. Of course he leeches you. You barely have the strength to protest. He says it'll balance the excess heat. You think it's just what he does when he's bored. Historians still debate how seriously guilds took medical care. Some say the most elite orders had access to advanced healing knowledge borrowed from foreign scholars. Others argue most wounds were treated with little more than wine, bandages, and wishful thinking. Based on your experience, you're firmly in Camp B. You've had everything from dislocations to fractured ribs, each one handled with creativity and zero anesthesia. You've bit down on leather straps, on your own hand, once even on a candle holder, while someone reset your shoulder with a jerk that made your vision go white. You woke up on the floor. They told you that meant the treatment was successful. There's a phrase tossed around the compound. If you're well enough to curse, you're well enough to serve. It's meant to be encouraging. It's not. One of your worst injuries came from a fall, a simple misstep on a rain-slick beam. You landed on your side, heard a crack, and couldn't breathe right for 3 days. The healer told you to drink boiled garlic water and meditate. You did. It didn't help. And infections. Oh, infections are the real enemy. You've seen friends die, not from blades or arrows, but from cuts. Tiny wounds that turned red, then hot, then lethal. The guild has ointments for that. Foul-smelling stuff, with flecks of silver and ash. But they're rationed, given only when someone important says you're worth saving. Quirky detail for the scholars out there. Medieval medicine relied heavily on astrology. You were once told not to get treated until the moon entered Virgo. You went anyway. You're pretty sure Virgo would have approved. Sometimes the guild will bring in outside help, an apothecary or monk with healing knowledge. They never last long. Either they ask too many questions, or they accidentally help someone who was meant to die. In this job, even kindness is political. You've learned to treat yourself, to stitch your own wounds when needed. You've sewn your forearm shut in a barn by candlelight. You've set your own finger after it snapped during a rooftop tumble. You carry dried moss, crushed willow bark, and clove oil in a pouch tied to your thigh. You're a walking emergency kit with trust issues. But even with all your resourcefulness, the worst part is when you can't see the damage, when your insides ache, when your lungs burn, when your mind slips into places you can't quite pull back from. That's when medicine fails you entirely. That's when you lie in your bunk, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this is the wound that doesn't look deadly, but is. You remember one of the senior assassins, old, grizzled. He had a cough that never went away and a knife in every sleeve. One day, he stopped coming to meals, then to meetings. Then he just disappeared. No one asked. No one explained. Someone said, he got tired of healing. You understood what they meant. Sometimes you get tired of healing too, because every scar tells the same story. You survived. Again. And every time you wonder, for what? You tape yourself together. You drink whatever they give you. You walk it off when you can't run. And you keep going. Because in this world, healing isn't about getting better. It's just about staying alive long enough to hurt again. The streets are quiet. Too quiet. A candle flickers behind a curtained window. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then stops. You pause, not because anything seems wrong, but because you've learned that nothing turns fatal faster than a whisper in the wrong ear. In this world, everything can turn on a whisper. You've seen it happen. One servant idly mentions a cloaked figure seen near the stables. One drunkard brags about a strange coin he found. One child giggles about a funny man on the roof last night. That's all it takes. Suddenly, your whole mission is compromised, and the walls feel like they're listening, because sometimes they are. You've trailed targets through alleys only to discover they were expecting you. Why? Because someone whispered, and you'll never know who. That's part of the fun. That's the terrifying part. The guild teaches you to listen more than you speak. But even silence has a tone, a rhythm. You can tell when someone's hesitating just a beat too long, when a question isn't a question, but bait. You learn to read rooms like maps, and every conversation like it might end with a dagger. There's a saying you've come to believe. The deadliest blade is the one carried on someone else's tongue. Historians still argue whether medieval spy networks operated like organized webs of informants, or were more loosely structured. But in your experience, even the most casual comment from a drunk groom or flustered nun could unravel months of planning. Information travels faster than you. And whispers, they don't need legs. They just need ears. You once spent a week planning a quiet elimination of a tax collector turned extortionist. Everything was in place. Entry points, distractions, escape routes. But the night before the job, a traveling merchant spotted you entering town, recognized the way you walk, and made a joke about it at dinner. A joke. The next day, the target was gone. So were 3 guards who'd been stationed just in case. You spent 3 days belly down in a barley field, hoping not to be discovered. all because of a whisper. And yet, you can't stop people from talking, so you learn to control the narrative. Plant your own whispers. Sometimes, your missions begin before the target even appears. You spread a rumor, hint that someone else is coming, leave a false trail, a dropped knife, a trace of poison where it doesn't belong. The goal isn't to hide, it's to confuse. A distracted man is easier to kill than a wary one. Here's a quirky detail for your insomnia. There were instances in medieval courts where assassins would send poems or riddles ahead of a kill, psychological warfare wrapped in verse. You've tried it once, left a short line on a mirror in coal. The one who waits does not knock. You don't know if it unnerved the target. You just know he didn't sleep that night, and that made your job easier. The real trouble, though, isn't outside. It's inside. Your own guild is full of ears. You're all trained liars, observers, analysts. No secret is safe for long. One wrong phrase during dinner, one loose word in a training circle, and suddenly, people are looking at you differently, like they know something, like they're waiting. You remember a fellow assassin who used to whistle a tune when nervous. Harmless, right? Until one day, someone repeated that tune to him in the hallway, quietly, as if to say, "We see you." He left the next day. No goodbye. No trace. Just a silence so loud it made the rest of you paranoid for weeks. You're not paranoid, though. You're prepared. There's a difference. At least, that's what you keep telling yourself. You've stopped speaking more than necessary. You nod, gesture, shrug, let others fill the air. You're safer that way. Less to be quoted, less to be misinterpreted, and still, somehow, people know. Not everything, of course, but they know enough to make you uncomfortable. Like how that cook in the last city recognized your limp, said his cousin had the same one after falling off a roof. Or how the innkeeper didn't ask for your name, just handed you a room and said, "Don't worry, we don't ask questions here." It's exhausting. Like walking through fog, always waiting for the shape inside it to turn. You once dreamed of a world where no one spoke, where everyone communicated through glances and gestures. It was peaceful, brief, beautiful. You woke up to a whisper outside your door. So now, when you pass through villages and cities, you keep your hood low, your answers short. You slip coins into palms and make it clear you're not someone to gossip about, because the only whisper you want to be remembered by is the one they never heard coming. The crowd cheers. Someone tosses a cabbage. A drummer bangs out a gleeful rhythm. And you're the main event, tied to a post in the village square. Hood ripped back, mouth dry, body trembling. You were caught. And now you're about to learn firsthand what happens when the shadows fail you. Getting caught isn't common, but it happens. Even the best stumble. A misstep, a mistimed escape, a broken lock that was supposed to be oiled, or, worse, a betrayal. You've trained your whole life to avoid this exact moment. But the world doesn't care how fast you are or how many poisons you've memorized. It only cares that you were seen, and when you're caught, the punishment is never quiet. They make a spectacle of it. Medieval towns don't just execute criminals, they perform justice. Stocks, gallows, hanging cages. dismemberment wheels. They're not tools of the law, they're instruments of fear. And you, the assassin, are the perfect offering. Mysterious, masked, dangerous. You're everything the townspeople fear in a world they can't control. Sometimes they'll parade you first, through mud, through laughter. People spit, children jeer. A priest might toss you a final blessing. A guard might trip you by accident. You try to keep your face blank, not because it helps, but because it's the only thing you still own. Historians still argue whether captured assassins were publicly tried or quietly disposed of. In some regions, secret executions were preferred, less messy. In others, especially during periods of unrest, nothing says order like stringing up a trained killer before a screaming crowd. You once witnessed one of these yourself, a fellow guild member caught during a botched escape. You stood in the back, face covered, pretending to be another bored townsman. You watched them haul her up. She didn't beg, didn't speak, just looked straight ahead, like she'd already left her body behind. It took too long. You never forgot her face. Your guild trains you for this, not how to escape, though that's covered too, but how to end things quickly if escape isn't possible. Hidden vials, blades sewn into sleeves. One trainee memorized pressure points on their own neck that could knock them unconscious before torture began. You respected that. You carry a thin glass shard tucked behind your molars. Still untested, you hope it stays that way. Here's a disturbing fringe fact. In some places, captured assassins were not executed immediately. They were employed, forced into service as state-sanctioned killers, turned against their former guilds. Whether out of fear, leverage, or torture-induced compliance, these converted assassins became walking betrayals. You've never met one, but the guild warns you often. Better to die than to serve the wrong cause. Torture is always a risk. You've trained your mind to resist. Mental exercises, memory palaces. You can recite an entire poem backward while holding your breath, but pain doesn't respect poetry. The guild teaches that if you feel your resolve slipping, imagine yourself somewhere safe. Your first successful mission, a quiet lake at dawn, a face you once loved. Whatever keeps you human, just long enough to lie well. But not everyone breaks because of pain. Some break because of shame, because getting caught means failing. Not just the mission, but everything. Your purpose, your training, your name. You think about what they'll say about you. A failure, too slow, careless. That hurts more than the ropes cutting into your wrists. Still, not every capture ends in death. Sometimes you're ransomed, sold back to your guild. That comes with its own price. You return, but you're watched, tested, used as bait to see if you flipped. You're never trusted again. One misstep, and they assume you've turned. And maybe you have. After all, how many times can you be dragged through mud and chained to a wall before something inside you snaps? You've heard the horror stories. Assassins left to rot in iron cages, hung above city gates. No food, no water, just exposure, flies, and the slowly dawning realization that even the sky won't save you. You've seen a man burned alive in a tar-soaked robe. They called it purification. You called it fear, weaponized. You try not to think about these things when you go on missions, but you always pack that shard. You always check your exits. You always scan the crowd for the person who isn't looking at you, because that's the one who knows. And if one day you are caught, you pray it's quick. You hope it's quiet. But more than anything, you hope the guild never finds out you hesitated, because that's when the real punishment begins. You're back at the compound. The mission went well. The message was delivered. The noble is dead, but the air is off. People avoid your eyes. Your handler hasn't spoken to you in days. And when you step into the mess hall, the room quiets. That's when it hits you. You're not safe here either, because you're expendable. You always have been. This is the hardest truth to accept. Not that the world outside wants you dead, but that your own guild would hand you over without flinching if the winds shifted just enough. You're not a member of a family. You're a resource, and resources get used and then replaced. Your guild doesn't show affection. You've known that since the first time a child vanished from the dormitories and no one asked where he'd gone. But you hoped, foolishly perhaps, that your skills, your loyalty, your record might earn you something, some protection, some margin of error. They don't. Historians still argue whether assassin guilds operated like true militarized hierarchies or resembled more of a cutthroat meritocracy. Every man and woman for themselves. In your case, it's both. There's structure, yes, rank, ritual, but underneath it all is a seething pit of ambition and suspicion. You've seen it before. An assassin gets popular, talked about too much, gets too visible, starts earning coin, and whispers. Suddenly, they're compromised, sent on a high-risk mission, or reassigned, or they disappear, and a younger version of them takes their place. You once overheard a senior member say, "Better to prune the tree before it grows too wild." It chilled you, not because of the words, but because of who they were said about. A woman who had trained you, covered for you, even saved your life once. She's gone now. No one mentions her. Her room is already filled. You tried asking what happened once. Your handler stared at you a moment too long and said, "Why? Are you thinking of following her?" That was all it took. From then on, you kept your questions to yourself. Here's a fringe detail that might help you sleep worse. In some historical orders, there were rituals designed specifically to root out overreaching members. Tests, feigned promotions, simulated betrayals. The goal? Weed out those who believed themselves untouchable. The reward for passing? You get to live with the knowledge that the people closest to you just tried to kill you. You feel it now in your day-to-day. The casual glances, the half-locked doors, the sudden coldness in someone's tone when your name comes up in conversation. Once, you found your gear inspected, not officially, quietly, like someone was counting how many blades you still carried, and wondering what else you might be hiding. You start to double-check everything, your food, your satchel, even your boots. You sleep with your knife under the blanket now, not just under the pillow. You keep a note hidden behind the wall brick, a list of exit points and safe houses in nearby towns. Because if they decide you're a liability, there won't be a meeting, there won't be a warning, there will only be the quiet knock, or no knock at all. You once watched a young assassin fall out of favor for botching a mission, not even fatally, just sloppily, left a trail, got noticed. The guild let him stick around for a few days, just long enough to sweat, to wonder, to hope. Then, one morning, his bunk was empty. No body, no blood, but a single coin had been left on his pillow. You asked what it meant. Someone muttered, "It's the guild's way of saying thank you, and goodbye. You know too much. That's what makes you valuable. And dangerous. The longer you survive, the more missions you complete, the more intelligence you absorb. And that's a problem, because if you ever flipped, if you ever walked away with all that in your head, you'd become the guild's next target. There is no retirement, no golden years, no seaside cabin with a faithful dog and a dusty blade hung over the hearth. There's just now the next name, the next task, and the growing suspicion that one day your name will be on someone else's parchment. So you keep your head down, you speak less, you finish faster, you nod when given orders and smile when dismissed. You've learned that survival in this life isn't about being the best. It's about being the least threatening until it's too late for anyone to stop you. Because if you're always expendable, then maybe it's time they forgot how dangerous you really are. You thought the battlefield was dangerous, the rooftops, the nobles' chambers. But those are easy compared to where you are now, inside the guild, where the deadliest blades are hidden behind smiles. Cloak and dagger politics, your new battleground. Assassins don't just train to kill, they train to manipulate, to navigate webs of whispers and favors, to anticipate betrayal like it's part of breakfast. And here, in the heart of your own guild, everyone plays the game. No one says it, but the signs are everywhere. Assignments that shift without explanation, promotions delayed, praise withheld, glances exchanged over maps, behind closed doors, in the pause before a meeting begins. The hierarchy isn't as simple as rank. It's layered in loyalty, legacy, and quiet vengeance. You once saw a junior assassin rise quickly, too quickly, charming, sharp, always in the right place, at the right time. A month later, the veteran who trained him was relieved of duty after a mission gone wrong. Word has it, the plan was leaked. Word also has it, the leak came from someone with a smile too wide for his own good. Historians still argue whether internal guild politics were structured like courts, rife with ambition and factionalism, or more akin to religious sects, where obedience was absolute. But in your experience, it's both. There are zealots who believe the guild is sacred, and there are ladder climbers who'd poison your porridge just to move up one rung. You've learned to watch for the little things. Who shares bread? With whom? Who always lingers after briefings? Who doesn't spar anymore? Because they don't need to. Their weapon is no longer steel. It's influence. Here's a fringe tidbit you picked up in one of the colder compounds. In some guilds, apprenticeships weren't assigned at random. They were tests. A handler might choose a promising recruit and deliberately pair them with someone they wanted to eliminate. Then sit back and see which one returned. Brutal HR policy, but effective. You remember one such pairing? A quiet boy with fast hands, a, a mentor with too many enemies. Only the boy came back, and he didn't seem surprised. You don't ask questions anymore. Your own mentor, gone. No one says why. One day he just stopped showing up to meals. You found a knife on your bunk the next morning. His. No note. Just the implication. You kept it, but you never carry it. That feels like a trap too. Now that you've risen in rank, you're part of the meetings. You sit in the circle. You nod. You keep your tone measured. Your advice vague. Offer too much, and someone might use it. Offer too little, and someone might suspect. You once saw a decision swing on a look, just a look. Someone proposed a mission. Another raised a brow. The proposal vanished, and so did the proposer. 2 days later, you learned to frame everything as for the guild. Not for you. Never for you. Ambition must be hidden behind duty. Pride must be wrapped in service. But deep down, you know what's happening. You're in a cage full of knives, and no one's sheathing theirs. The newest threat? A rising star, young, smiles too easily, mirrors your moves a little too closely. You don't trust him, but you praise him in meetings. You compliment his efficiency. You tell others he reminds you of yourself, because that's how you survive. By putting your enemies so close, they don't realize you're already watching them sleep. You've prepared counter-rumors, in case someone speaks against you. You've stashed letters and falsified maps. A whole trail of breadcrumbs that leads nowhere. You've even whispered lies about yourself, enough to muddy the waters, make your story just complicated enough that no one's quite sure who you are anymore. And that's the trick. Not being feared, not being loved, but being unpredictable. Because if no one can read your game, they won't know when you've already won. Still, it weighs on you. The constant calculation, the effort to stay one move ahead. You miss the simplicity of missions, the clarity of the kill. Here, everyone smiles, everyone nods, but some of them are already planning your funeral. You sleep less now, not because of nightmares, but because you're dreaming in code. Every conversation replays in your mind, looking for missed meanings, for gaps, for traps. You test your own food. You vary your routes. You've stopped meeting people alone. And yet, despite all this, you're still here, still breathing, still dangerous. You've lasted longer than most. You've learned that in the guild, it's not enough to be the best assassin. You have to be the best actor, because sometimes the kill is easy. It's the politics that will get you killed. You're crouched behind a crumbling wall in some forgotten village, rain sliding down your face, and your hands are gripping the hilt of a knife, so worn it's lost half its edge. The boots on your feet have holes. The poison vial in your pouch has dried out. The garrote in your sleeve is fraying. This is the glamorous life of a medieval assassin. The truth, the tools of the trade are terrible. Your gear is a patchwork collection of half-functional blades, stolen flasks, handmade rope, and wishful thinking. Yes, your guild provides basics, but those basics? They're more like suggestions. The budget isn't going to steal the way it used to. You're expected to maintain your equipment yourself, sharpen your own blades, reinforce your own straps, replace your own boots, which, by the way, are custom made for silence, but fall apart if you so much as look at a puddle. One time, You wrapped your feet in burlap for a week. While waiting for replacements, you still have the scars. One of your toes may never forgive you. Historians often debate how advanced assassin tools really were. Did they have specially crafted gear from blacksmiths in secret, or just modified everyday items? Most evidence suggests a mix, and in your case, it's a mix of old soldier gear, random kitchen cutlery, and whatever the last guy didn't die with. You've fashioned throwing knives from broken scissors, carved lockpicks out of sheep bone, used a comb handle as a garrote handle. The resourceful survive. The rest get found with half a lockpick still sticking out of their belt pouch. You once used a chicken bone to jam a door. Not proud of it, but it worked. There are some tools the guild issues formally. The signature dagger, for instance. Yours is good, balanced, blackened steel, no reflection. It's not flashy, but reliable. The catch? You only got it after surviving 3 missions with borrowed blades. Your garrote wire is technically a repurposed lute string. Works fine if you remember to oil it so it doesn't snap mid-choke. And yes, that's happened to someone else. You don't like talking about it. Your poison kit comes in a tiny wooden box with a cracked hinge. Inside, several powders, dried herbs, a mortar and pestle that looks like it was stolen from a kitchen, and instructions scribbled in shorthand that might be a riddle. You once mistook belladonna for crushed black pepper. That was a very short-lived stew experiment. As for your bow, you had one. Once. Hand-carved. Quiet. Lovely pull. Left it behind when a guard patrol came through early. It still haunts you, not because it was special, but because it worked. You haven't found another like it since. Boots? They're your lifeline. And your curse. They're custom-fitted, soft-soled, made for silent movement. They're also thin, poorly weatherproofed, and wear out faster than you can steal new ones. You once spent an entire winter taping yours together with waxed thread and sheer determination. Snow still got in. Here's a quirky little fact. Some guilds supposedly issued assassin tools disguised as everyday objects. Rings that unscrewed into needles, belts that concealed knives, a coin that could be broken open to reveal poison powder. You've only seen one of these, a button dagger, beautiful, delicate, and snapped clean off the first time someone tried to use it. You don't rely on fancy, you rely on what works. And what works is rarely glamorous. It's oiling your leather gear with rancid animal fat because it's the only thing available. It's wrapping linen around your blade's hilt to avoid blistering after the grip came loose. It's remembering that your backup dagger is hidden in your left boot underneath the hole, and nothing stays reliable for long. Rope frays, metal rusts, flint wears down. You've sparked fires with pebbles before. Not efficient, but it's that, or freeze. You once had a mission where your crossbow string snapped just as you were lining up the shot. It whiplashed your hand so hard, you dropped the weapon and had to improvise the kill with a cracked wine bottle. The lesson: the weapon never saves you. You save you. So you've developed a rule. Never carry more than you can replace. Never grow attached to a weapon. Everything breaks. Everything rusts. Even the best gear gets left behind eventually. You have a pouch of trinkets, odds and ends that might help one day. A fish hook, a spring from a clock, a thread of silver wire. You don't know when you'll need them. You just know you will. The guild tells you that real assassins don't blame their tools. They adapt. You tell yourself that every time your dagger slips, every time your boots tear, every time your pouch gets caught on a rusty gate, you adapt even when you're bleeding and limping and soaked to the bone. Even when you're empty-handed and still expected to finish the job, because the tools may be terrible, but the kill still needs to be perfect. The candles flicker, the bells toll. Somewhere down the corridor, monks are chanting. You're crouched behind a statue of Saint Whoever, heart pounding as incense drifts thick through the air. You're not here to pray. You're here to kill, and it's Lent. Religion, you've learned, complicates everything. In the world of medieval assassins, politics are sharp, but religion is razor-edged. You operate in a culture that lives and dies by omens, feast days, relics, and superstition. One misstep, and you're not just a murderer, you're a heretic. And heretics don't get quick deaths. Your guild doesn't officially care about doctrine. Not really. The gods, the saints, the scrolls, all just tools in the grander mechanism. But you live in the middle of it, which means you need to navigate it. Some contracts are declared untouchable during holy seasons. No blood on Easter, no poisons during Epiphany. One time, you had to cancel a mission because the target entered a week-long silent retreat, and no one could figure out which room he was sleeping in. But most of the time, the mission proceeds, which puts you in awkward positions, literally and spiritually. You've crept through monasteries at midnight, avoiding stone corridors still warm with whispered prayers. You've disguised yourself as a pilgrim, complete with staff and blistered feet, just to get close to a bishop. You even faked a confession once. The priest told you to forgive yourself. You stabbed someone later that night. You're still unsure if that counted. Historians still argue whether assassins operated with religious sanction or in defiance of it. There are stories of papal assassins, of holy orders that struck down enemies of the faith. Others say assassins were universally excommunicated. The truth? Likely somewhere in between. You've heard of a sect in the East that used verses from sacred texts as codes for execution times. Another that lit candles before each mission, one for the body, one for the soul, and one for the silence to follow. You once tried it. The candle tipped over and set your sleeve on fire. You haven't done it since. But regardless of belief, you've learned that religion shapes everything. People's routines, their fears, their vulnerabilities. One archdeacon you were sent to eliminate kept a relic on his person at all times. Bone of a saint wrapped in gold thread. You watched him touch it after every meal, before every prayer. Right before he died, he reached for it. He missed. You've also seen religion used as shield. Nobles claiming sanctuary in chapels. Criminals buying indulgences to delay judgment. Once, a monk carried a wanted man on his back through the town square, chanting protection spells while everyone looked away. You didn't. You followed. You waited. You finished it quietly, under the eaves, between verses. Here's a quirky fact to chew on tonight. In some medieval towns, bells were considered sacred sound barriers. Killing someone during the ringing of a church bell was seen as a grave sin or a loophole, depending on who you asked. You've used the bells twice now, once for a clean kill, once for cover during a very messy one. But sometimes the religion isn't theirs. It's yours, or it was. You remember the prayers you were taught as a child. You haven't said them in years. Not out of defiance, just drift, disuse. You wonder sometimes if there's still a part of you that believes, or at least wants to. You once passed a chapel mid-mission. The door was open, candles glowing, a choir practicing, and something inside you froze. Not out of guilt, not out of fear, but out of memory. For a moment, you remembered what it felt like to not carry this burden. You kept walking. Your guild has no chapel, no priest, but one of the older assassins keeps a shrine in his room, small, careful, hidden behind a torn tapestry. You saw it once, said nothing. He's still alive. You sometimes wonder if there's mercy left in the world for people like you, if any God watches your path, if forgiveness is a concept that applies when your entire job is designed to be unseen. You don't seek absolution, but sometimes, when the candles flicker just right and the air smells of smoke and old stone, you whisper a name, one you took, one you carry, and in that moment, maybe something listens, maybe not, but you continue the mission anyway, because whether the gods are watching or not, the guild definitely is. Your target is not who you expected. You'd prepared for a bishop, a warlord, a traitorous steward, someone powerful, someone significant, someone worthy of the blade in your hand. But no, tonight it's a goat thief. Yes, a goat thief. Apparently, he's got dirt on a duke, a rumor, a document, something he shouldn't have. And now you, a finely trained, rain-soaked, sleep-deprived professional assassin, are crawling through a hayloft, trying not to scare the livestock while planning how to take out a man who smells like spoiled cheese. Welcome to the bizarre underbelly of your profession. The targets get weirder. The guild doesn't always explain. They don't need to. They send the name, the location, the expectation. Sometimes you're removing a political threat. Sometimes a lover gone bitter. Sometimes, well, you once eliminated a jester who had too many ears in too many corridors. His last words were a pun. You didn't laugh. You still feel weird about it. Historians often overlook this side of assassination. The strange, petty, sometimes downright ridiculous assignments buried between major operations. But if you spend long enough in the shadows, you learn something uncomfortably true. Not all kills are justifiable. Some are just orders, and those are the ones that cling to you. The goat thief, for example. Turns out he wasn't a thief at all. He was a messenger, someone who stumbled upon a noble's secret correspondence and thought he could trade it for safety. Poor guy thought knowledge was currency. It is, just not for him. You watched him from the rafters, saw how he tucked the letter under his bed, how he kissed the edge of it, probably couldn't even read. You waited until he fell asleep, slipped in, took the letter, left a coin under his tongue, and a breathless end. No glory, no poetry, just a nameless man buried under straw. Another time, you were sent after a wandering healer, old, blind, with a talent for making nobles feel better in ways that made your handler frown. Was she a fraud? A prophet? A danger? No one said. You approached her as a traveler, hoping for insight. She looked directly at you, blind eyes somehow seeing, and whispered, "You don't belong to yourself anymore." You hesitated. That hesitation cost you a week of punishment training. The mission was reassigned. She died anyway. You don't know if it was your guild. You never asked, because sometimes the weirdest part isn't the target. It's how the job feels, like an echo you don't understand, a riddle with no answer, a task soaked in meaning that no one will ever explain. Here's a quirky tidbit. There are tales of assassin guilds that refused jobs if the reasoning felt unjustified. A code, they called it. A moral spine. You envy those stories. But your guild has quotas, balance sheets, they call them. Sometimes a kill is ordered to send a message. Sometimes it's a favor. Sometimes it's simply housekeeping. You once eliminated a falconer, not because he knew anything, but because someone feared what he might learn. The man died, feeding his birds. They shrieked for hours afterward. You didn't sleep that night. Not because of guilt, because of the birds. You begin to notice a pattern. The more absurd the mission, the less you understand. The less you understand, the harder it becomes to believe in what you're doing. But you do it anyway, because the questions don't stop the assignments. They only slow your hand, and that's dangerous. You've started writing a list in your mind. All the strange ones. The goat thief, the jester, the healer, the girl who carried secrets sewn into the hem of her wedding dress, the boy who spoke 6 languages but couldn't tell a lie, the monk who laughed too loud. You never say their names out loud, but they stay with you because they remind you that this job isn't about justice. It's about control. And sometimes the people who get in the way of control are just trying to live. Still, you sharpen your blade. You put on your hood. You take the next name. Because in this life, even when the target makes no sense, the orders always do. You sit on a bench in a crowded village square. A spoon clinks gently against your bowl of stew. Children laugh in the distance. The butcher's shouting about lamb prices. A bard strums an out-of-tune lute by the well, and yet, somehow, you feel eyes on you, because in this world, everyone's watching everyone. It's easy to forget just how tightly wound medieval communities are. People know each other. Every cough, every absence, every unfamiliar boot print gets noticed. You're not walking through anonymity. You're navigating a web of social surveillance so thick, it might as well be chainmail. You shift your posture, pretend to be weary from travel. Someone glances. You nod. They nod back. Then go whisper to someone else. This is the reality of a small town. They may not know who you are, but they know you're not from here. That's all it takes. You once had to abort a mission after a stable boy recognized your belt buckle from the monastery 3 towns over. "Didn't I see you praying in St. Arlen's chapel?" he asked. You smiled. lied, left before sundown. The target died a week later from poison in his ink pot. Historians still argue whether surveillance in medieval villages was coordinated like a proto-police state, or simply the result of tight-knit rural life. Either way, it works. The watchful eyes of gossiping bakers and nosy seamstresses do more damage than the king's guards ever could. You try to play it cool. You mimic the pace of the locals. You drink the same bitter ale. You listen to the same boring stories about who's courting who, which cow got sick, and why the blacksmith's daughter shouldn't be trusted with a spinning wheel. But the moment you slip, a phrase out of dialect, a coin too clean, a gesture too refined, they notice. And once they start talking, you're done. It's not just the people, it's the architecture. Narrow alleys, low ceilings, creaky floorboards that snitch on your every step. Windows with cracked shutters that never quite close. The entire village becomes a network of unintentional alarms. You remember one mission where the target lived above a tannery. You'd scoped the place out for 3 days, knew every exit, every pattern. On the 4th day, you made your move, only to find the neighbor had trained pigeons, dozens of them. They exploded into the sky the second you touched the roof, and within 5 minutes, the whole town was awake. Birds, again. Quirky fact for your sleepless mind. Some cities actually hired children as informants, not formal jobs, but coins for whispers. A noble sees a shadow, flips a copper to the nearest kid. Suddenly, half the neighborhood is describing your face. You've been described too many times. Brown cloak, walks like a soldier, quiet voice, doesn't blink enough. You started blinking more after that one. It's a constant game of deception. You leave false trails, change clothes twice in one day, stage public arguments to make people remember the wrong details. Once, you faked an ankle injury and shouted your way through a street to make sure the nearby merchant described you as limping, angry, and definitely from the south. None of it's random, because you know how fast the truth travels. One word in the ear of a merchant becomes a warning in the mouth of a servant, becomes a rumor in the ears of the guards, becomes a sword waiting at the door. And you're still pretending to drink stew. You've learned to speak in half-truths, to wear second-hand clothes, to pay with worn coins. You keep a rotation of accents, names, scars. Sometimes you forget who you're supposed to be, but it's better than being found out. Worse than being watched is being memorable. That's why your guild teaches invisibility, not through absence, but through banality. Be so boring, no one wants to remember you. Once, you told a story about grain prices to a farmer for so long, he actually left before the stew finished. That, you decided, was your finest hour. But paranoia isn't just external. Your fellow assassins are watching too. Every mission has the risk of exposure. If you botch it, even slightly, others may be assigned to observe, which really means assess whether you're a risk. You once shared a room with someone who reported every movement you made. You caught them scribbling notes on your sleep habits. You left the next morning and never went back. You know you're being watched. You watch back. That's the game. You don't relax in taverns. You don't drink anything you didn't pour. You don't take the same path home twice. Even in the compound, you sit with your back to the wall. Because in this life, nothing goes unnoticed. Not your footsteps, not your face, and definitely not your silence. The saddle creaks beneath you. The wind bites. Ahead, the road twists into woods so dark they look painted in ink. You urge the animal forward, gently, with as little pressure as possible. It whinnies, stops, and tries to turn back. Because let's face it, horses hate you. You've learned that the hard way. In theory, a horse should be your best friend, fast, sturdy, and perfectly suited for a quick getaway. In practice, most of your equine encounters involve biting, bucking, or flat-out betrayal. Your guild doesn't train you to be a cavalryman. No mounted archery here. You're expected to know just enough to ride when needed, steal one if necessary, and dismount without snapping an ankle. But there's a reason. Most of your escapes are done on foot. Your first real mission with a horse ended in disaster. The animal decided it didn't like the smell of your cloak and bolted sideways into a ditch. You limped to the rendezvous point. The horse went home without you. The guild called it a learning opportunity. Historians rarely focus on assassin transportation, probably because it's unglamorous and borderline comedic. But some do speculate that stealth operatives relied heavily on pack animals, relay systems, and bribes to get where they needed. And you've tried them all. You once paid 3 different stable boys to deliver misleading reports about where you were headed. That worked until the horse you did steal threw a shoe in the first half mile and left you jogging the rest of the way, cursing every hoof in history. You've also tried camels, donkeys, one particularly memorable goat cart. The goat, frankly, was more cooperative than most of the horses. Here's a quirky tidbit for your travel journal. Some medieval records mention horses trained not to respond to strangers, making them useless for theft. You've definitely met a few like that. One stood perfectly still while you mounted, then sprinted full speed under a tree branch and nearly knocked you out cold. You swear it smirked. But even when they're behaving, horses aren't exactly stealthy. Hooves on stone echo like war drums. And no matter how quietly you ride, there's always a chance your horse will pick the exact wrong moment to neigh like it's auditioning for a choir. You once missed a perfect shot because your horse decided to announce its presence outside a noble's garden wall. You were chased for 3 miles. The horse, of course, outran you. You've tried bonding, feeding them apples, speaking softly. One even let you braid its mane. You thought, maybe, you'd finally found your steed. It kicked your boot across a field the next morning. So now you treat horses like the unpredictable allies they are. Dangerous, beautiful, emotionally manipulative beasts who may or may not ruin your mission based on how their breakfast went. Still, you need them. Some targets flee. Some towns are too far to reach on foot, and there's nothing quite like galloping across open fields under moonlight, cloak whipping behind you, the world reduced to speed and breath, and the rhythmic thunder of hooves. It almost feels freeing until the saddle strap snaps, or the horse decides it doesn't feel like it anymore. You've memorized inns that offer reliable mounts. You've learned to judge temperament by eye. The same way you judge a guard's drunk level or a merchant's greed, you pick the ones with scars, the ones that don't flinch, the ones with the same quiet anger you carry. They don't trust you either, but they'll run, and that's enough. You carry hoof balm now, extra shoes, bits of sugar root in your pouch, just in case you need to bribe your ride. You travel light, but always with space for what really matters. Escape. Because when the mission goes sideways, and it always does, you don't want to be the assassin sprinting through the mud while the guards give chase on horseback. You want to be gone before the shouting starts. So yes, horses hate you, but you've learned to hate them right back, lovingly, strategically, professionally, because in this job, survival often comes down to one very simple question. Can you get away? And no matter how temperamental, stubborn, or soul-crushingly dramatic they may be, a horse at full gallop is still the fastest way to disappear. You stare at the sky and sigh, not because you're having a deep philosophical moment, but because the clouds are turning that color, the one that means your next 12 hours will be spent slipping, shivering, and cursing quietly into your cloak, because in your world, the weather never cooperates. Rain? It's not just wet. It's loud. Every droplet on a wooden rooftop, every splash in the alley, every soggy step is an alarm bell. You've learned to time your movements between thunderclaps. Once, you spent 2 hours on a single tile roof, waiting for wind gusts to cover your creaking steps. Snow, worse. It crunches. It squeaks. It betrays every footfall. You once tracked a target across a snowy ridge, only to realize he had doubled back and was tracking you. You barely made it out alive. Since then, snow makes your pulse spike. Sleet, just rain with an identity crisis, and the added bonus of making every surface feel like it was greased by a mischievous god. Historians often mention the impact of weather on medieval warfare, agriculture, and trade, but not enough on its effect on espionage. You could be the most silent killer in the land, but if you're caught in a hailstorm with a snapped cloak pin and an ice patch underfoot, you might as well walk into the guardhouse waving. Then there's fog. Ah, fog. The romantic's dream. The assassin's actual nightmare. Visibility drops to nothing, which sounds ideal until you realize you can't see either. You've tripped over more crates and startled more goats in fog than in any other condition. And the mud? Mud is its own category of despair. It steals your boots, swallows your daggers, drowns your dignity. One mission, you ended up crawling through a swampy orchard and came out looking like you'd lost a fight with a very aggressive pudding. You once infiltrated a fortress during a torrential storm. The wind howled, shutters banged, guards huddled. Indoors, you thought, perfect cover, until your wet cloak turned into a 20-pound sponge that slapped loudly with every step. You nearly got caught by a servant who thought you were a ghost. To this day, you're still not sure she didn't want to believe it. And heat? Don't even start. A summer mission sounds nice until you're soaked in sweat. Your weapons are sticking to your skin, and you have to pretend you're not cooking inside your dark hood. You can't hide in shadows if you are the steam rising off a sun-baked roof. Here's a quirky fringe tidbit for the trivia-starved. In some regions, assassin guilds tracked the lunar cycle and seasonal shifts with obsessive precision. Missions were sometimes postponed due to wind direction. One scroll you read suggested not attacking during a new moon if the humidity was over 70%. You thought it was a joke until you tried it. They weren't joking, but even with all your planning, the weather wins more often than you do. You've ruined perfectly timed missions because a sudden gust carried your grappling hook 3 feet to the left. You've lost pursuit of a target because rain turned the trail into mush. You've had disguises fail because a hot breeze lifted your hood just long enough for someone to catch your profile. Sometimes you wonder if the weather knows, if it's playing with you, toying, testing. You wouldn't be surprised. You've started reading the signs like a druid. Wind direction, bird patterns, the smell in the air. If the frogs are croaking weird, you plan for delays. Your cloak now has hidden ties to pin it close in the wind. You carry waxed leather to protect maps and notes. You've even learned to walk differently depending on the moisture in the cobblestones. Because here's the truth. The weather is another assassin. It kills the careless. And like you, it doesn't care about your plans. But every so often, it gives you a gift. A gust that drowns out your leap. A shadow from storm clouds that lets you cross the courtyard unseen. A blizzard that hides your tracks for good. Those nights, you almost believe it's on your side. Almost. But mostly, it just ruins your socks. You step into the tavern, not too confidently, not too quietly, just enough to blur into the background. Just another tired traveler in the long line of forgettable faces. You smile at the barkeep, nod at the hearth, sit near the window but not too close. And then you become no one. Because in this job, hiding in plain sight is an art. You don't always lurk in shadows or crouch on rooftops. Sometimes the smartest move is to be visible, but boring. Disguised, yes, but not by costume, by demeanor, by intent. You're not the mysterious figure in the corner. You're the man polishing boots, the woman serving soup, the monk who snores in the back pew, and you've gotten good at it. Your guild calls it soft concealment. It's how you melt into crowds, disappear at banquets, slip through guarded halls by being expected. Not ignored, expected. There's a difference. You've posed as a stable hand, a fishmonger, a falconer's assistant, even a traveling juggler, once. Terrible idea. You cannot juggle. The trick is knowing just enough of the job to sell the role without actually needing to do the job. You let people fill in the blanks, and people are surprisingly eager to fill in blanks. Historians still debate whether medieval assassins truly used disguises with regularity, or if that's post-Renaissance embellishment. But you know better. Disguise isn't a fake nose and a floppy hat. It's knowing how to hold a ladle like you've done it before, how to swear like a dock worker, how to complain about the weather like you genuinely shovel manure for a living. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. In some guilds, initiates trained by living among civilians for a year, never breaking cover, never revealing their identity. You tried that once, spent 6 months pretending to be a gravedigger. You were almost happy until you realized the local priest was asking too many questions. You vanished the next day. Your tools change with your disguise. No flashy weapons, no dramatic cloaks. You carry a small blade tucked in your boot, a garrote coiled beneath your belt. You keep a satchel with just enough dirt on it to look used, but not enough to invite inspection. And your expressions, they're calibrated. You've practiced tired nod, mildly annoyed peasant, and slightly drunk woodsman in the mirror until they feel more natural than your real face. One of your proudest moments was spending an entire week in a castle posing as the cook's cousin. You chopped onions, gossiped about nothing, and fed a baron who never once guessed he was sitting across from the person plotting his death. You waited, you listened, then you served a final dish that made him sleep forever, and you walked out the front gate with the rest of the kitchen staff. That's the art. You've learned to ask questions that sound nosy, but are really intel gathering. You've perfected the village accent. You know how to laugh too loud, to spill just enough drink, to scratch your chin when you're thinking, and to whistle off-key just to seem real. And when it works, when you blend so completely that no one notices, it's better than invisibility. But it's not without risk. You once slipped too well into a community, spent 3 days posing as a carpenter's apprentice. The carpenter liked you, offered you a place at his table, said you reminded him of his late son. You almost said yes. Then you remembered why you were there. You finished the mission. You left in the night. You didn't sleep for 2 days, because the better you get at becoming someone else, the harder it is to remember who you were. Sometimes you wonder if there's a version of you still in that village, laughing by the fire, sanding wood with raw hands and calloused fingers. But that version doesn't exist, never did, because in your world, people like you don't get to stay. You get to pass through, to leave, just before someone remembers your name, to vanish just before they start asking why the quiet tanner knew how to pick locks. So you keep perfecting the performance. You sit in another inn. You drink another warm ale. You nod at the right stories. And when the time comes, you leave without a trace. Because hiding in plain sight isn't just survival. It's the closest thing you have to peace. You run your fingers over the parchment. It's stiff, slightly damp, and smells faintly of smoke and old garlic. Not exactly regal. But this is a contract. And in your line of work, contracts are everything. Because behind every silent blade and poisoned cup, there's a piece of paper with a price on a life. You're not just killing for sport. You're not killing for honor. You're killing for a contractual agreement, an arrangement made behind thick walls, sealed with wax and delivered through hands you'll never see again. Most of the time, you don't know who wrote it. You don't need to know. The guild receives the request. They vet it, supposedly. Then it's passed down, 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 until it reaches your hands, and suddenly, someone you've never met becomes your business. The wording is always vague. Eliminate the target. Secure silence. Prevent future interference. Sometimes there's a location. Sometimes not. Sometimes just a name and a payment to be collected after. The paper doesn't ask questions, and neither do you. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins worked mostly on political orders or for private clients. The truth, it was both. If there was coin to be made, and silence to be bought. Someone was offering, and someone was accepting. Here's a fringe tidbit. In some regions, assassinations were billed, itemized, like carpentry work. One noble silenced, 3 guards distracted, 2 horses stolen. You've never seen one yourself, but a fellow operative once claimed to have copied such a list into a prayer book just to hide it from prying eyes. The idea of someone praying over a body count still makes you smile, uneasily. The contract is usually delivered by a handler, sometimes in person, sometimes in the form of a seemingly innocent delivery. An apple with a pin in it, a shoe with a red thread, a message scrawled in soap on a mirror. You've received one folded into a roasted pigeon. Long story, still not over the smell. Once it's accepted, it becomes sacred, not because of honor, because of consequence. Failure means punishment. Hesitation means reassignment. Disobedience means, well, no one talks about what disobedience means. You just notice empty bunks. You remember one contract that felt different. It was sealed in gold wax, too ornate for comfort. The target was a child, barely 12, heir to something or someone. You hesitated, looked twice. The handler shrugged. If you don't take it, someone else will. You passed it on. That same night, the bunk across from yours was empty. The next morning, a new recruit took your place at breakfast. Since then, you've taken every contract you've been given, and yet not all of them go smoothly. One time, your target turned out to be a decoy, planted by a rival faction to trap you into breaking the guild's neutrality agreement with a local lord. You barely escaped, lost 3 fingers worth of blood, and a toe you never particularly liked. Now, you test every parchment for hidden ink, every seal for false wax. You once found a second contract under the first, slipped between the folds, naming you as the target if the job went wrong. Your trust in paper has never recovered, but the system persists, the chain of demand and supply, the mechanism that keeps money flowing and enemies quiet. You're just the sharp end of the process. Sometimes, contracts arrive with coins already attached, half now, half after. Other times, you have to claim the payment by presenting an object, a ring, a tooth, a piece of cloth soaked in blood. It's grisly, yes, but it's proof. And proof, that's currency. There's an odd satisfaction in fulfilling a contract. It means you've done your job. You've maintained your standing. You get to breathe another week, sleep a little easier, trust your next bowl of stew not to be spiced with retirement. But every now and then, you wonder, what happens to the contract after? Does someone collect it? Burn it? Archive it? Is there a secret library filled with names crossed out in blood, shelved in silence? Or do they simply vanish, one parchment at a time, as if the lives they ended never mattered? You'll never know. And maybe that's the point, because in this business, the only trace that matters is the one you don't leave behind. You sit alone at the edge of a forest, knees pulled to your chest, cloak wrapped tight against the chill. The fire you didn't light flickers only in your imagination, because smoke attracts eyes. Eyes attract swords. So instead, you shiver, because in your world, there's no retirement plan. Assassins don't grow old. Not really. The job isn't built for longevity. It's built for usefulness, for obedience, for silence. And when those start to fade, so do you. You've seen what happens. Old hands lose their edge, their hearing, their reflexes. And in a line of work where hesitation is a death sentence, that's unacceptable. Some simply disappear. Others are promoted to quieter roles. Teaching, recruiting, managing logistics. Most just vanish. No ceremony, no farewell feast, just an empty bed and someone new in their place by morning. You've asked once, just once. The handler's response? The work ends when you do. Historians still speculate on the fate of aged assassins. Did they retire with wealth and anonymity? Were they hunted to preserve secrets? Or did some manage to disappear on their own terms? It's one of those murky mysteries no record keeps. Intentionally, perhaps, the fringe tales. They whisper of one or two who faked their own deaths, burned their ledgers, and fled to far-flung corners of the map. One became a monk, another a bookseller. You dream of that sometimes. A quiet shop, ink-stained fingers, a bell above the door that rings for normal reasons. But then the wind shifts, and you're reminded you're still in the field, still alive, and, thus, still a liability. You know your own limits are creeping closer. The knife doesn't spin as smoothly in your hand anymore. Your knees ache when crouched too long. Your reactions are a fraction slower. No one said anything yet, but you feel it, like a weight pressing in from the future. You've started stashing coins in odd places. Not much, but enough for something. A bolt hole, a fresh name, a last escape. If you're smart, you'll use it before someone else decides your time's up. And that's the real tension. You don't get to announce your retirement. You slip into it, or you don't. The guild doesn't exactly throw a party and hand you a pension scroll. You either vanish on your own, or get retired, quietly, by someone younger, faster, and less sentimental. It's already happened around you. That woman who taught you to scale walls, using chimney smoke as cover, found face down in a river 2 months after saying she wanted to leave. The man who taught you disguise? One day, he just wasn't in his usual spot. His gear was gone, his room cleaned. You asked once, got silence, so you keep your thoughts quiet, your escape plan unspoken, because to say it aloud might be to invite someone to hurry you along. Still, you dream of a village where no one knows your name, of evenings spent mending fishing nets instead of sharpening blades, of not sleeping with one eye open, of watching rain through a window instead of over your shoulder. But even if you made it, would you ever really relax? Could you? You carry too many faces, too many names, too many silences that were never yours to keep. And maybe that's why so few truly walk away. Because even if you outrun the guild, outrun the contracts, outrun time itself, you can't outrun yourself. Quirky bit of trivia. One rogue guild supposedly offered fake deaths as a service for aging members, staging elaborate exits and providing a new identity somewhere safe. Sounds noble. Too noble. Probably a myth. Probably. Still, you keep a map, with a town circled in charcoal. Just one, far from cities, near the coast. You've never been. But you heard a rumor they don't ask questions there, that they respect privacy. You've promised yourself if you survive 10 more jobs, you'll go. You're on number 9. You haven't told anyone, because the work ends when you do. But maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one who ends it. You sit at the edge of a rooftop, legs dangling into darkness, watching torchlight ripple across the cobblestones below. A noble's procession clinks its way through the night, flanked by armored guards and trailing perfume through the sour air. You should be focusing on the target. Instead, your thoughts spiral back to everyone who got in the way, because in your line of work, you're not just ending lives, you're disrupting ecosystems. Every death leaves a ripple, and sometimes the consequences of your work are stranger, messier, and far more exhausting than the kill itself. You've toppled minor lords and watched 3 more scramble to claim their titles, each one worse than the last. You once silenced a tax collector accused of corruption, only for the village to suffer even higher levies under his replacement. And let's not even talk about the time you removed a bishop, only to learn his successor was a heretic with a taste for fire and brimstone. People think you deal in neat endings, but the truth is, your blade unravels, threads you'll never see, tied again. Historians still argue about the long-term effects of individual assassinations in medieval society. Did they accelerate reform? Delay progress? Was the assassin a tool of justice or chaos? The honest answer? Probably both. Probably neither. You're a scalpel, but sometimes the cut bleeds into the next century. You once completed a mission in a coastal town. Simple, clean, but within a week, the target's absence had sparked a civil feud between rival shipbuilders. 5 dead, 2 exiled, a fire that gutted the docks. You were long gone by then, but you heard about it weeks later from a singing beggar who didn't know you'd caused the chain reaction. It gnaws at you, not guilt, exactly, but something adjacent, something colder. The knowledge that your work doesn't end with the body, it ends with the fallout. And sometimes, the fallout has nothing to do with justice or order or strategy. It just happens. And then there are the innocent ones. The housemaid who walked in too early, the courier who overheard the wrong phrase, the stable boy who recognized your eyes. None of them were meant to be involved. But your job doesn't allow loose threads. They became collateral. You remember each one, not their names. You never knew those. But the way they looked, surprised, scared, too young. You don't dream often, but when you do, it's usually them. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. There are records of assassin guilds that offered apologies, written notes sent anonymously to the families of those caught in the crossfire. You've never written one. You wouldn't know what to say. Sorry I ruined your life while avoiding mine. Not exactly comforting. And then there are those you didn't kill, but who vanished anyway. Informants who got too curious. Locals who helped you, then became liabilities. You can't track every consequence, but sometimes, a year or two later, you hear whispers, a village emptied, a merchant ruined, a family that moved without a word, It's like being followed by ghosts who don't even know your name. And yet, this is the cost. You weren't trained to fix the world. You were trained to remove obstacles. But even that gets murky. Sometimes, the obstacle was a truth teller, a reformer, a survivor, someone who made the wrong person uncomfortable. And you made them disappear. You don't ask anymore about the clients, the motives, the wider story, because when you have asked, the answers have left stains you couldn't scrub clean. So you keep it simple. You kill, you leave, you move on. But tonight, sitting on this rooftop, the weight of the unseen toll presses on you harder than the blade on your belt. Because you know, this next kill will start another ripple, and someone, somewhere, will drown in it. You adjust your gloves, rise slowly. The torchlit street stretches below, full of laughter and lies. You remind yourself, you're not here to judge, you're here to execute. Still, you can't help but wonder, who's about to suffer for something they never did? And will you hear the echo, or will the silence be louder? You're in a cellar, low ceiling, damp walls, and a faint stench of vinegar and mold. A single candle flickers behind you, casting nervous shadows. You just finished the job. Clean, silent, the body's cooling upstairs, already forgotten by the house it once owned. And yet, you stay. Because you need to feel something. Anything. You didn't always feel this numb. In the beginning, every kill had a thump, a weight, a strange echo inside your ribs. You told yourself it was adrenaline, maybe even remorse. But now, it's just a pause, like closing a door, like ending a sentence. You lean back against the wall and let your eyes drift shut. For a moment, you let the silence breathe. You think, am I still here? Or just what's left behind? Some assassins drink after missions. Others pray. You just sit. Because in this job, the real danger isn't getting caught. It's disappearing from yourself. Historians rarely write about the emotional toll of an assassin's life. There are no journals filled with confessions, no confessionals carved into monastery walls. What few fragments exist, paranoid, cryptic, one found in a ruined safe house read simply, I forget what my voice sounds like. You know what yours sounds like, but just barely. Here's a fringe fact for the night. Some guilds used nightly rituals to anchor their members. Chants, names of past kills, a phrase repeated to remember who they were. You tried that once? Repeated your childhood name into a cracked mirror until it stopped sounding real. It didn't help. You've begun to feel like you borrow lives, slip into roles like skins. But when the mission ends and you take them off, what's left? A face? A body? A list of contracts? You remember one woman, an innkeeper, who greeted you every morning with stale bread and a tired smile. She never asked questions. You stayed in her inn 3 times over 3 years, always under a different name. On your last visit, she said, "You look familiar." You smiled, lied, left before sunrise. You never went back. Sometimes you wonder if she still remembers your face, or if your face even matters anymore. Your hands bear the faint tremble of overuse. Your knees crack when you crouch. You've gotten better at masking fatigue, but it's there, settling in your bones like a second shadow, the kind that never leaves, no matter the light. You think about the word ghost. It used to mean spirit of the dead. Now to you, it means something barely there, something forgotten while still alive. You don't want to become that, and yet you're halfway there already. You once tried to quit, truly. After a long mission in the mountains, you buried your tools, burned your robes, and walked into a farming village with nothing but a stolen name. You lasted 2 months. Then someone from the guild arrived, smiled, sat beside you during mass, whispered, "You're needed." You didn't argue, because when you looked into their eyes, you realized they knew everything about your life in that village. Everything. No one leaves the guild, not fully. Even if you run, they'll find you. Even if you survive, they'll know. And so you returned, picked up your blade, took the next contract, let go of the name you were trying to learn, back to the cellar, the flickering candle, the soft echo of silence and soot and absence. You rise, wipe the dust from your boots, pull the hood over your eyes, and when you step outside, you're someone else again, someone useful, someone no one will remember, but deep inside, somewhere under all the layers, you whisper your own name, just once, to remind yourself you existed, even if no one else will. Your boots crunch on frostbitten leaves as the forest exhales its midnight breath around you. The job is done. No alarms, no chase, just quiet. And yet, even here, even now, you don't stop listening, because deep down, you know you're never truly safe. That's the final, cruel truth of your life as an assassin. You may survive the poison, outsmart the guards, evade the bounty, but safety, that's fiction. Something sold in bedtime stories and noble courts. You've seen too much, done too much, left too many bodies behind. There's no version of this where you settle down and aren't followed. You sit on a fallen log. Cold seeps in. You press a hand to your ribs, where an old scar still twinges when the air is damp. A gift from a job gone sideways 2 winters ago. You got away, but not all of you did. Every assassin you know carries something like this. A limp, a tremor, a scar you don't ask about, and worse still, paranoia. It's the invisible wound, the one that never heals. You feel it every time a stranger's gaze lingers, every time a door creaks unexpectedly, every time a footstep echoes behind you, just a little too long. Even in sleep, you flinch. You've built your life around layers of escape. Fake names, false trails, contingency routes, etched into your memory like sacred scripture. And yet, there's always the fear that this time, someone else is 3 steps ahead. Maybe it's a rival guild. Maybe it's a former employer cleaning up loose ends. Maybe it's just your own past catching up. Historians still argue whether any medieval assassins ever retired in peace, or if they were all eventually consumed by their own webs. Some stories speak of agents who died under false names, buried in unmarked graves. Others of legends who faked deaths and lived quietly as farmers, monks, or healers. No one knows for sure, and that's the point. They vanished well enough that history lost track. It's what you dream of. Not fame, not vengeance, just vanishing. Here's your last quirky fact of the night. In some guilds, the final test wasn't a kill. It was a disappearance. A full erasure. No trace. No signature. Only then were you considered a true master. You never took that test. Not officially, but you've been practicing for it your entire life. You reach into your pack, pull out the coin pouch, heavy with gold, that cost more than money. Each piece is a scar, a name, a story no one will tell. You think of the people who hired you, the ones you spared, the ones who never saw you coming, and you wonder if any of it mattered. You've become the whisper in a corridor, the flicker at the edge of a candle's flame, the thing that people fear but never quite see. But you've also become tired. You watch the horizon lighten, just barely, not dawn yet, but close. You've got one more contract in your satchel, sealed in wax, unopened. You don't want to read it. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. You think of the town by the coast, the one you circled in charcoal on that old, crumpled map. You picture a quiet life, a name you choose, a room with a window, a shop bell that rings because someone wants bread, not blood. You know it's a fantasy, but sometimes fantasies are the only thing that keep the blade from trembling. You rise slowly. Let the night fall off your shoulders like a discarded robe. You walk with quiet steps, one foot in front of the other, deeper into the woods, toward a future you're still trying to believe in. The trees don't ask who you are, and for the first time in a long while, you don't answer. Now, as your mind drifts and the night air cools, let the last traces of this story settle into stillness. No more footsteps echoing through alleyways. No more whispers behind doors or glances over your shoulder. Just quiet now. Just the hush of distant leaves swaying in the dark and the soft pull of breath moving in and out. You're not running anymore. You've made it through the rooftops, the back rooms, the secrets and shadows, and whether the assassin found peace or simply vanished into myth, you're still here, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by safety, in control of your own story. Let your eyes soften. Let your breathing slow. There's nothing left to do tonight. No poisons to mix. No escape routes to trace. Just sleep waiting. Soft, quiet, forgiving. Think of a calm sea. A sky beginning to brighten with the first pink hints of day. Imagine warm sand underfoot and the sound of a quiet town waking without fear. Let go of the names, the contracts, the scars. Let go of the cloak, the blade, the silence. Tonight, you don't have to be anyone. You don't have to hide. You just have to rest. Good night, traveler. You made it.